Alrighty. Let me just give myself a moment here just to make certain that everything is up to standard. That everything. Just want to make certain I'm streaming on all channels, firing on all cylinders. Oh, wait, that ad looks so weird. Anyway, we love 720p. Wait, there's something with Trovo's thing. There was something with that. That looked weird. Like the video player was like tearing and stuff, and it's like, well, I shouldn't be having tearing. I've got what do you call this thing? FreeSync, G-Sync compatibility. Yes. Anyway, welcome to Draconian Discourse. Once again, it's been a while since the last episode. The show where I've become insanely long-winded and very disorganized in my thoughts, just rambling for hours on end. I'm trying to figure out how to put my thoughts in a more of a succinct manner, of course, which is obviously going very, very well. I think I might do better, like going off of something that's very guided, which I've like briefly talked about. But you know, I'm not exactly trying anything too new this time. I'm kind of going back to the original structure that I had for these, which was, of course, the EFAP related, just using a video as a jumping off point for discussion by rebutting what is said in the video. So I'm gonna be going back to formula. So that's what I've got planned for today. First of all, on the docket though, last episode was a couple of months ago, and that was the one that I had on 2Mad. Now, I want to do a brief reflection and correction on just sort of the main attitude that I had along the way in that episode, where I believe I clearly was reacting very emotionally to a situation where I should have been given more thought to, and the reason for that being is that empathy does not make good policy. Is going to sort of be the theme that's going to be the principle for today, is that empathy does not make good policy. When you are being empathetic with somebody, when you are trying to feel exactly how they felt in a particular situation, it causes you to you're only in their shoes, and it makes it so that you're not in anybody else's shoes but theirs. And so a lot of the times your solution, your prescription for that situation is like, well, come on, like, give them a break, or like, they're justified because look at, they did this in this situation, but they were feeling this way, and that's really what motivated. Like, understanding the motivation between or behind why a certain action was done by an individual does not actually give, like, it's like, well, certainly I can understand that they felt that way, and that makes sense why they reacted that way given their feelings. That doesn't make them correct. Feelings do not make you correct. I think that's one thing that we've sort of forgotten in this world, is that just because you feel a certain way does not give you the right to act a certain way, especially when that way causes harm to other people. So I wanted to issue sort of a bit of a correction, a reflection of what I said in that episode. Sort of a lot of the attitude that I had was that because 2Mad did good things, because life is complicated, and I understood that there were some things that I couldn't say that he was a net negative on the world, because look at all of the good that he's done in XYZ ways. I don't think I really made the case of that very well. I could certainly point to many things that he'd done to help me and several others, I'm certain. And I'm certain that there's much praise to be had of what he has done for people. One of those things being, I as an autistic person saw his videos, and it filled me with a sort of like hope, in the sense that I knew that, well, if he can be himself, and if he can be confident, and if he can do all of the things that he does, not really caring what other people say about him, when it all just kind of slides and bounces right off him, no matter what, and he's always going to be willing to do the whatever it is that he does next, that's kind of crazy and wild. It's like he's being himself, and he's being successful while doing so, and he's providing us an entertaining look into sort of a lot of his activities as he's going along the way. So it's like, yeah, I'm all good. But that coming from it, from that angle is definitely not respectful, and not a holistic, objective point of view when it comes to, is this person guilty or not. A lot of my impetus for I should stop using the word impetus so much. I don't think I think I've tried to squeeze it into many places where it doesn't really belong. But a lot of my motivation behind talking about that day was that I doubted, or a lot of my reasoning was that I doubted Jameski's story because I knew that Jameski held a grudge against this guy. Of just like, you've just hated this guy for forever, and you have no reason not to just continually hate him again. So I'm going to dismiss your story outright. Your stories, any testimony you've got, I'm not really going to be ready to believe. Because you don't have a lot of credibility in my eyes. I think a lot of that really is subjective, because there's a lot that I just wasn't considering from his point of view. Like, the reason why he hated him could very well have been more than just what I had sort of heard through the grapevine of that original drama in like 2016 or 17 or whenever it was, when it was like, might have been 18, I don't know, but whenever it was, like when it was, the bowling ball and the clearly the way that Too Mad behaved and reacted in that situation was in heavy denial of everything that happened. But he also found it difficult to be serious about that in many ways. I think in the way that I'd seen it is that I thought, well, no, he had been serious about it. But now I'm taking a look at that from another point of view, especially understanding what happened to him, and being able to sort of calm down about it and realize, well, my policy can't be based off of emotion on its own. I really ought to. Were my channels disconnecting? What was the thing indicating that? Was that actually indicating that I was getting disconnected for a moment? Strange. Empathy does not make good policy. It's always the best idea. In really any case that I should be dealing with this from the point of view that just an objective position on it, where it's like, well, just because he felt a certain way doesn't make it okay to behave in the ways that he did. And I was already sort of along those lines when it came to some of the things where it's like, dude, you are not helping your own sort of PR predicament. In this case, when you go out there and double down on so many things, it's like, wait a minute, like, just because people are mad at you, sort of like this Trump syndrome in a way, where it's like, just because people are mad at you, or are criticizing you for any reason, doesn't mean that they're actually like, always, like, they're not always wrong. I think that this is one of the troubles with sort of cancel culture at large, is that just because someone is quote unquote canceling you doesn't mean, like, and this is the trouble with it all in the end, is that it's really easy for people who are in trouble to say, well, you cried wolf a million other times, you made molehills mountains out of molehills a million other times. So how is it any different with me? And I think, in order to make you have to take that credibility away from people who are going to abuse it by only going against people who are actually bad, who have actually done bad things. I think in this case, the anger against Too Mad is wholly justified in many ways, especially considering more of the evidence that I've reviewed, where it's like, it seems pretty credible. Just because I can try to, dig into and read between the lines as to why he behaved that way. I think that can be important as sort of a cautionary tale, to like, hey, you cannot behave this way just because you are in this predicament mentally, emotionally, doesn't mean that you can behave this way. It's still unacceptable. I wasn't particularly happy with a lot of the cruelty that was had on social media, but I do kind of understand where it came from now at this point, because if what you see him as is someone who put people in danger, and that's what you're judging is him as a person with what he did, then I cannot actually disagree with you that he was not a good person. And I think I suppose that's sort of what I had ended off with in many ways, was that it's just like, I really felt for him in so many ways, but I can't disagree that he was being terrible. Of course, I do believe in the general idea that if you make every good person your enemy, no good people will be left to help you when the going gets tough. We can't cry wolf every 2 seconds. And I recently tweeted out this idea in the context of people specifically praising Christine Blasey Ford, where it's like, well, no, her claims were not proven true at all. When you make an accusation, the burden of proof is on you to prove that, and especially when there's more corroborating evidence to the contrary of that claim, it's like, well, you lied, you're a liar, and I said, you deserve every enemy you make when you make enemies out of good men, which is, it's just blatantly the case. Every single time you make a martyr out of a good person, you are damaging your own cause, and this is seen throughout history plenty of times. You don't even have to really know all that much about history to see that you don't want to give your enemies martyrs, especially if you are correct. Be holding yourself to a high moral standard, no matter what your motivations are. I mean, not no matter what but within reason, of course. Which is not reason is in short supply these days, obviously. But there are some things that you can't do no matter how badly you want to achieve a certain goal. And I think for Too Mad, he went really just overboard with a lot of his activities and his behavior, where it was all about, I can do this, and I can be as crazy as I want, and I'll be totally fine, and then it's, you end up putting people in physical danger and fearing for their own safety, and it's like, well, at that point you've actually shirked your duty and as a good man by putting people in danger, and I don't really blame anybody who wants to protect people who are put in danger by someone who behaves like that. With that in mind, in other news, O.J. Simpson finally died. Good riddance. And this is one thing. It's part of why I'm recanting this previous statement. A lot of people saying good riddance to Too Mad. A lot of that sort of cruelty going around. I can't say that I have a problem with that. I cannot be intellectually consistent and say that it is wrong to say good riddance to Too Mad, but not to, not to O.J. Simpson. It's fine with O.J. Simpson because he actually killed people. It's like, well, obviously there's a difference in crimes here, but Too Mad could have killed people with a lot of the evidence and the allegations that came forward that I believe now to be credible. It is clear that Tumad was also putting people in danger, which means that he was violating a very similar moral obligation that O.J. Simpson also violated. The one thing that you can say about Tumad is that call it a tragedy or call it whatever you want. He's no longer with us. He's no longer alive, and so there are people that he was putting in danger who no longer have to fear. It doesn't necessarily mean that it brought them closure. Goldie wasn't necessarily brought closure by it. But at least he was not able to continue putting people in danger. Which, he also wasn't able to continue doing whatever good things it is, but for what it was, it sort of pales in comparison to some of the things that happen behind the scenes. And I don't think it's okay to sort of play apologia for that. And I'm not about to. But with O.J. Simpson in particular, on that topic, he killed 2 people, and he clearly did so out of rage. It was a clear rage-filled attempt on their lives that was successful. And he spent the entire rest of his life denying that it ever happened. And the only reason that people the only reason that he got off, and the only reason that he didn't die in prison, which he absolutely should have died in prison. He should have died in prison like probably 10 to 15 years ago or something. He certainly should not have gotten out. I think it's actually a true travesty, miscarriage of justice that he was able to die surrounded by family peacefully. I don't think he should have been granted that when he took that away from 2 families. When he decided to kill Ron Goldman and his ex-wife, he forcefully ripped those people away from the ability for their families to actually have that closure. And then he gets it because people were too entrenched in their empathy for him, tainting the jury pool, destroying the credibility of our justice system in the process, and allowing a guilty and frankly evil, vengeful, vice-filled man to get off. And then there has to be some sort of a rage-based it just further creates a further racial divide in America in many ways when you again make good people your enemy and make bad people your friends, because then you end up being tainted by the bad people that you are associating with. I saw a tweet, and I'm not about to look it up, but I saw a tweet that was just like, white people are getting real excited about the fact that OJ died, and then he said, like, white people in the replies who were saying that, hey, why are you even making this about race? This is a horrible person. You should really be ashamed that you are saying because he's black he deserves to not be considered guilty for the egregious crimes that he committed. They said the people who were saying that were, and he juxtaposed that with an image of the Charlottesville, like, that was in Charlottesville, right? The candlelight vigil or candlelight march or whatever the hell they did with their white supremacist nonsense. He juxtaposed that. People saying, why are you making this about race? When we clearly have a evil man who killed 2 innocent people because he hated the situation that they decided to put themselves in, to perfectly within their rights to have done what they did, and he was just not happy that their rights superseded his. So for some reason he thought that it was within his rights to kill them, and clearly that jury and America at large in many ways said, yes, it is perfectly within your rights, if you are a black man, that you can kill people for being unhappy with the way that they decided to use their rights, which is evil and perverse. And to say that someone who takes that position, especially saying like, hey, this makes things worse in the end for the racial divide, this divides people even more, this is not good, for anybody involved here, to say that that is akin with an actual racist sentiment. It's an anti-racist sentiment in the first place. To say, hey, I don't care what race you are. If you do evil things, you are evil. It doesn't matter the color of your skin. It's like, hey, I'm purple and I don't have any gumption. That's not the word I'm looking for? I don't know. I don't hesitate to say that people are bad when they are bad. Especially when they are murderers, like, goodness sake. And clearly, the only situation where I had struggles doing that, was when it was a little too near and dear to my heart. And I really do wish that I had thought about that before I had actually gone on, because it makes it sound a bit rich for me to be saying this in this predicament. But it's again the reason why empathy does not make good policy, and we all need to be able to learn that just because we feel bad for the person in that situation doesn't mean that they are inherently victims because they felt justified in what they're doing. Nobody does something without feeling like they are justified in doing it, unless they're like some sort of dark triad personality, unless they're like borderline. Am I thinking of borderline? Whatever it may be, people don't just do things and not feel justified in doing them. Human nature is to justify the way that any individual behaves, where it's like, well, I didn't, I was okay in doing that because of this, and that, because of the way that I've been treated by other people. It's okay for me to treat them in a way in retaliation to that, and that's why human beings are so subject to tribal nature. It's why it's one of those things that we are called to overcome is that feeling of, well, this person was like me and I could understand the way that they were, and therefore they should not be held accountable. I think when I try to argue from that position, I'm not kind of no longer on the right anymore. I'm no longer in the right, that's for certain, because one of the fundamental principles I do believe in is that doesn't matter who you are, where you came from, and what has happened to you, it cannot justify evil. Evil is evil no matter where, no matter what motivates it. If you are violating someone else's rights, then it is still evil, and there's really no excuses for that. So I do wish that that O.J. Simpson had gotten what he deserved, because he didn't. But it's never too late, and I was actually quite happy to see that many people on Twitter, in response to people making perverse statements about it, especially trying to make it all about race when it was actually all about a guilty person being guilty and doing something repugnant. I was glad to see a lot of people actually holding their feet to the fire when it came to that. And it's sad that people are still going to be like, well, you're just a white supremacist for saying that a guilty man is guilty regardless of race. It's like, well, kind of is not a good reflection of your own moral character and of your own, you're only going to make enemies out of good people that way. It's not the hill you want to die on is one that is actually just racist in the favor of one over the other. Because that principle, if you say, well, it's okay when we do it, that principle cannot be exclusive to you. The principle of, is it okay or is it not okay, must be universal for all parties involved in order for there to be a organized, just society. So it's a good thing to keep in mind, and it's the reason why we have discourse and the reason why we think about these things, so that we don't have to depend on empathy for our policy and don't devolve into tribal warfare as we are often apt to do. So with that in mind, intro to the video that I will be responding to today, which may or may not take a long time, and I may or may not be just going live with Hollow Knight afterwards, we shall see. But the video that I'm going to be looking at today is called Voluntary Extinction. Now, I was introduced on this topic by a coworker, and I can understand a lot of the arguments that are being made. I believe in favor of this this philosophical idea, if you can call it that. I do believe that obviously that it is wrong, but it is sort of a fascinating thing. I think it to be a sort of an outgrowth on Marxist on Marxist ideology. I do believe it to be a sort of a reflection, and it's interesting where the sort of the intersect between Marxism, between extreme empathy in place of reason. Aristotle had always said that that man's purpose is to reason, and if a man does not reason as he is designed to do, then a man is not it's not good, because he's not actually fulfilling his purpose, and that is intrinsic to his design. It's part of the reason why it's not tribal warfare that is the answer to everything. That is animalistic behavior, is to say, well, because you hit me, I'm just going to hit back. In a civilized society, civilization was created so that we don't have to create additional externalities against each other, so that we can actually think about the way that we respond to things, rather than feeling and only being motivated by our feelings overall. Reason is a big point to why we exist, which is of course is something that Marx never really had considered, which is why he is one of the greatest fools of all of history. But in the context of this, that sort of intersection where I think sort of a Christian or perhaps a Judeo-Christian belief system, and or perhaps I would say a disintegrating Judeo-Christian belief system and a Marxist pervasive ideology sort of intersect, is at the general idea of communism. There are many people who there are many people who believe that because we are asked to in the Bible, or in whatever the standard works may be, that there are certain practices of being love thy neighbor as thyself, that this means that communism is clearly the way to go when it comes to policy, to politics, and to government in general. But it fundamentally forgets that thou shalt not steal as well, and that human, the basic concept that by default, what did I think Colossal put it really well. I suppose if I had done actual preparation, in his first FouseyTube video, this is one thing that I've been thinking about for a while. I'm gonna have to swap over here. Because it's just a straight up like principled statement in a moral sense. That's not supposed to be Wait, that is monitored. Piss. I screwed things up heavily here. Yes. Did I just miss that? Okay, I don't know what I was doing there. I don't necessarily have to look up the clip. Is there a transcript? Ooh, I can look up the transcript. Yeah. Oh, this is just a great video. Clown is one of the greatest sort of amateur documentarian commentary, sort of like, yeah, I miss him. I I spoke with him like once in VC like many years ago, and kind of freaked him out with my fanboy-ishness. But I was a lot younger. It was like probably like 6 or 7 years ago or something. Interacted with him once or twice, but always looked up to him for many reasons, obviously. But yeah, this is the point that is made.
What about all the other good stuff I've done in my life?
This sentence is entirely broken.
What about the times I've given to charity?
People who use giving to charity to call themselves good people aren't good people by default. Charity, by its definition, is a selfless act, so to use it to your argument's advantage pretty much removes its entire purpose.
What about...
So, yep, you know, that's exactly how you can tell that that Clown and other people like him are absolutely not Marxists. You know, just a fundamental tenet of our moral society is that, you know, it deprives it entirely. Any charitable act is no longer charitable the moment that it is clearly being done for gain primarily. You know, should there be tax credits for giving to charity? So it's like, well, should there be any taxes at all, really? You know, it's like, you know, if we didn't have sort of a negative tax every single time that is like, well, you did something good, so we're going to reward you for doing something good. But it's like, well, because they got a reward for doing something good, then that kind of deprives it of its value, because now there's an additional reason to do it other than out of the kindness of your own heart. You know, those sorts of ideas when it comes to the expansion of the state and in a moral sense, what we are obligated to do with or without the government, it kind of falls flat on its face when it's made mandatory, especially considering, you know, when it is made mandatory to give not only to charity, but into like sort of an infinite charity, a universal charity where everybody gets given everything from everybody else, the pie in the sky, socialism, communist ideas. It just deprives it entirely of its value. Obviously that's a little bit off track from where I was headed with this, but you know, it's interesting to think about sort of those ideological roots where it's like, well, God said that you should love thy neighbor as thyself, and it's like, okay, so look at how much Christians give to charity. Are they doing it because they love thy neighbor, or are they doing it because they want the tax cuts? Or it's like, why are they doing it? Well, it's really easy to read between the lines, especially when you're already biased against a certain group. But you know, how many people who are socialists actually give to charity? Turns out not very many. It really is, in every single scenario when there is a socialist, communist, someone who is in the far right, authoritarian left, that's their agenda, you know, red, essentially, they really aren't willing to put their money where their mouth is, because they think that it shouldn't be them who has to foot the bill for taking care of everybody, but it has to be somebody else, because somebody else always has more money than them. And even if they had all the money in the world, then they wouldn't really want to give it to somebody else, because that is how you know, ism is created. There was a really interesting, and it is actually quite fascinating. I don't want to I don't want to go too off the beaten path with this. There's a song by Bastille called "The Currents," and it's actually about Donald Trump, which is really interesting. But it samples a line from an old cartoon and it says, "quote When anyone tries to it's on the tip of my tongue. When anyone tries to pit one of us against the other, we know that person stands to rob us of our freedom and destroy our very lives." That was a very bad, but it's actually really interesting, because I looked up the cartoon that it sampled that from, and it's actually directly in the context of a a fundamental condemnation of, you know, in it shows it as sort of a snake oil salesman type of a deal, where he's selling this ism. I really want to find what it's called, but it's just this short animated video where it talks about this ism, and it's communism or socialism, or authoritarianism, just effectively the massive expansion of the government to you know, I'm going to solve all of your issues because you don't have to have responsibilities. You can have rights and you don't have to have responsibilities, because that's just how good I am at doing that, is that I can actually pervert the nature of nature in and of itself, that the universe that we have, that, you know, for every action there's an equal opposite reaction. It doesn't apply anymore when it comes to society, because we want to actually remove those consequences from you, and I will take care of all of your problems. So it's no longer you are no longer responsible for the consequences of your actions, because I am responsible for them and I will take care of them. And you can have the rights and the responsibility, and then what immediately happens is you take away the responsibility and the rights go right with it. You take away the accountability and the acts go right with it. You are no longer allowed to actually live the life that you want to live, because, well, if you live the life that you actually want to live, then that might have negative consequences, and those consequences have to be stopped at any cost, because those consequences may cause you to have more freedom. Sorry, not more freedom. They may have caused you to have more money than anybody else, more value. You may achieve things that other people haven't achieved, and we can't have that, because that creates an inequity and an inequality that is inherently unjust, because clearly you've done something to hurt somebody in your process of doing that. So we can't have that. And that's sort of what that entire thing is about, and that's what that line is about. Is that you know, he's pitting us against each other, and he seeks to rob us of our freedom and to destroy our very lives. And it's very, very interesting in the context of Trump, because Trump was not an ideologue that intended to because he's still around, and he's going to be looking like he may clean house in the 2024 elections, which I don't know. I guess we'll see how it goes. He's getting old for certain, and he hasn't been exercising as much as he probably should if he wants to live a long time. But I think it may be hereditary. I'm pretty sure his father and his grandfather lived past 100, so who knows? Either way, we'll see how competent he can be when he gets as senile as Biden, which obviously does not spells a lot of doom for the country in many ways. But a lot of what Trump stood for, point being, is not to divide people, but actually to point out the divide that already exists. And that might just be, I'd imagine people who disagree would say that that's just sort of a confirmation bias, or whatever. But as it stands, you know, Trump was a result of a divide that already existed. And did he catalyze that divide? I think to a certain degree, yes. But also the way that many people on the left reacted to him catalyzed that divide even more. And they cried wolf so many times that it just wasn't going to be believable for many people in the American public. And especially on the opposite side of the political aisle, to actually go along with it anymore. It's just like, well, you've lied so many other times before. Why? You've lost all credibility with us, and especially with the media. That was the way that it was. You know, Trump was just kind of pointing it out, and in many ways, it led the American people, and I think myself included, in many ways to see Trump as a proxy for the American people, which is demagoguery, I think is the proper form of that word. It's Trump was and is a demagogue, and that can be certainly not great for our politics. But people love demagoguing, and it's not like it's going away anytime soon. If only it was so. But dignity went out the window. Dignity and decorum went out the window a long time ago. So 2 to the 1 to the 1 to the 3. I'm to the one, to the one, to the three. I'm gonna build a big old wall. You'll see. Okay, listen. Okay, wall. Anyhow, I just got possessed. I don't know what happened. I just saw that there was a chat, and then everything went dark. But what was I saying? Just made me lose my train of thought a little bit. But I do think that in context of where do I wrap that all in? It's interesting to use it in the context because I do see a lot of the things that Trump was saying as like, dude, what are you even thinking? So I kind of could get, I kind of understood the song The Currents a little bit more when I put it into that perspective, where it's like, well, there was a lot of stupid things that he said that were unbecoming in many ways, that were not good for discourse, not good for America or the world at large. But it's interesting to sort of like put Trump as the guy, because, you know, he's a demagogue, but he's certainly not, you know, peddling the ism. And that was the context that it was, where it's just like the government can fix everything for you. It's just like he didn't really do that on a governmental level in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, it was just like, hey, I'm going to give you back the freedom that we as the government have taken from you, because I'm not government, and I'm going to, as a non-government guy, I'm going to go in and clean house in the bureaucracy. Was he very successful at doing that? In some ways, yes. Overall, I wouldn't knock the entire presidency as worthless, because he did get a lot of good things done. And we'll see if he comes back and gets more good things done. But as it stands, it's like, well, you know, you could have done better. But regardless, it's interesting that it's like, you know, Donald Trump is the one who's peddling the ism, you know, the socialism, the communism, the authoritarianism, or you know, even worse, the fascism, which is like not even close to what Trump's actual positions are, at least what his actual governance is like. You know, turns out that it's really not. I don't know. It turns out Trump derangement syndrome is a thing, and perhaps you should get checked for it. But you know, yeah, the media. Anyhow, media, CNN fake. Oh, I don't know where that went. The throat situation just went a little bit odd there. But either way, in that sort of a context, wrapping my entire ramble here into you know, Marxism, cultural Marxism, and what I see voluntary extinction as a ideological outgrowth of Marxism. You know, where I was seeing that I thought was interesting, where you know, people, religious people, Judeo-Christian, in sort of a failing Judeo-Christian society, a crumbling Judeo-Christian society, or at least one that's asking a lot of questions and getting kind of confused. The media, fake news, yes. But you know, in that society, at the beginning of the foundation of the country, there were two religious sects that were outgrowths of Christianity, and they were the Shakers and the Quakers. Now, the Quakers are, you know, made a bit more of a cultural dent, because there was I mean, for many reasons, but it was primarily because their ideas differed slightly from the Shakers. They were associated together because they sort of had the same ideological roots, but they were really just like fraternal twins in a way. That actually looks surprisingly like Trump. I've never seen that emoji before. Very interesting. But either way. Yeah, they're sort of fraternal twins in a way. The Quakers, you know, weren't as sort of harsh on, like, you know, we need to convert a lot of people. To my understanding, to my like limited remembrance of what I learned in you know, U.S. history. You're welcome. Well, I don't know. I was gonna say thank you, but it's like, well, wait a minute. Like you did normally, I normally say thank you first. Kind of threw me a curveball there. Anyhow, but they, what was it? From what I recall, the Quakers kind of took root, and they had their sort of society that they had created, and they ended up causing, a lot more of a socio-political, historical dent than the Shakers did. And part of that reason is that the Shakers, because I believe that they had been led by a woman. I forget what her name was, but she had said that she was the second coming of Christ. There on the American continent to show the way. And one of the fundamental tenets that they had was that everybody was needs be voluntarily celibate because bringing more human beings into the earth was not God's way, something along those lines. I don't know if it was necessarily, I don't recall if it necessarily was because they were cruel, because they thought that bringing human beings into the world it was cruel. But it is interesting that they converted, they spread their message to a certain amount of people, and then they went along their ways, and their message was not very appealing to many people who want to live, believe it or not, and who want to procreate, despite the odds, knowing that yes, it's difficult, but actually a lot of other people's sort of ideas on what God is and what God wants from them is still like, hey, yeah, he meant it when he said multiply and replenish the earth, most people in Christianity do still believe that it's like, well, we're not here to be the last, the final rung in the ladder. We're not here to be the final generation. There was a cult in, I believe, the 80s. I forget what that one was called, where a bunch of people basically created like some insane like commune, and I don't know if it was a commune. What it might match the definition, I don't recall, but it was like they all just ended up getting poisoned because they'd realized that the leaders had realized that they kind of spelled doom for most of the people there, and so it was like a massive killing. Harder and harder to keep a family together more than ever. I do think that the challenge is imminent in many ways. It's very, very complicated, very difficult. But I do think with more difficulty comes more joy. But in the sense that the Shakers may have believed that due to this sort of idea that it's like, well, we should not be breeding. It's actually the best thing that we are not going to be breeding at all. And then the ideological movement dies out because there's nobody around to keep it going. Any unsuccessful ideological movement, if you could spell out how to not make any change whatsoever, it is to say everybody who believes what I believe should never have kids and never pass this on to anybody else. It's just like, well, like what are you doing then? Like you're gonna try and convince me on the idea that you should never try to continue living, and especially not try to continue living for somebody else. That seems a little bit morally bankrupt. And a lot of it is, if you believe it's right, then how at what point does your belief that it is right start to supersede other people's rights to not believe the same thing and to not behave accordingly to what you believe is right? Because if you think it is morally unjust to bring in anybody into the world, then do you also believe that that unjustness should be repaired by what's the word I'm looking for? A restriction on their ability to make those decisions. So this is very much off the cuff, or an ideology that seems to be of similar, after the heart of Margaret Sanger, the classic eugenicist who created Planned Parenthood as a means to realize her dream of removing the ability of all people to have the rights of the sacred the sacred powers of procreation, and because she was like, well, rights, like, my thing is rights and responsibility, acts and accountability. If you utilize your right to use your the powers of procreation to have a child, and you do so in an inopportune situation, inopportune timing, so long as there wasn't some sort of externality that was involved with that, then it's kind of on you to deal with the consequences due to that fallout. Whereas Margaret Sanger said, well, yes, because some people, and in particular, she was very much for the forced sterilization of poor people and in many ways black people, and sort of as an outgrowth to this idea, where it's just like, well, you guys aren't using your powers correctly, your rights correctly. You're making bad decisions, and I should be allowed to make those decisions for you. And if you're not going to make good decisions with your body, then I'm going to remove your ability to use your body in a proactive way to actually create human life. I'm going to permanently take that decision away from you. That is a fundamental ideological roots of Margaret Sanger, who created Planned Parenthood. Was the entire impetus, and I think I am using it properly in this situation, this entire impetus for the creation of Planned Parenthood, and it is a really good reason why to be suspicious of people attempting to take I don't know, just people who think it's a good thing, honestly. It's like, I think it still exists for the same reason. I'm not for eugenics in any way, and just because one person makes a reasonable risk assessment that says, actually, I don't think it's okay for me to bring in someone into this life because, I inevitably subject them to this imperfect world in which we live, to have a difficult time, doesn't mean it's like, well, but also difficult times can also create joy, and just because you have that idea doesn't mean that you have the right to remove my right to use my bodily autonomy in a way that is not in accordance to what your ideas are, and obviously I think that is a fantastic counter to the ideological fascism of someone like Margaret Sanger, who was an evil eugenicist, frankly. To sum up history in quote by Game Grumps: "You were different than me. I don't like that. I'm going to go to war with you." I was talking earlier about tribal nature, the tribal nature of human beings, and yes, that's a pretty accurate accurate read. There's a great simplicity is great in many ways, where it's like, well, it's simple, it's straightforward, it's pretty accurate. So yeah. Without further ado, though, I think I ought to actually get to the video at hand here. This is sort of this actual 1 hour preamble, because I thought I was actually going to make decent time with this, but clearly not. So one of the things that I'm going to be looking for, I suppose, on my ideological bingo board is, at what point does it not become voluntary anymore? Are you actually going to respect my rights to have a different risk assessment with this, and to say, actually, no, I don't think that it is worthwhile to say nobody should ever exist, because anybody who has existed has been subjected to some sort of negative treatment that has made them sad in some sort of a way. Sad to, expand that to a massive scale, miserable. It's like, well, what about the good side of that? Because I think this type of ideology comes out of a cultural, ideological pessimism, not narcissism, what's the other N word? Nihilism. A cultural nihilism, a hopelessness, and I don't think it really spells. I don't think it bodes well for anybody who's actually saying, hey, we should actually live. We should live for each other. We should live for the good things in life. It just sounds like people who are completely miserable, people who believed in sort of the ideologies of Hegel and Marx, who thought that other people can't make decisions for themselves. Margaret Sanger as well, I mean, Adolf's children swore to never have children of their own, to stop the bloodline for the good of humanity. Well, that sounds quite perverse, actually, because, as in Hitler, right? Like, I assume you're talking about that Adolf, but I do consider that to be quite a perverse way of thinking, because when it comes to Hitler, we believe that man must be punished for their own sins. Anybody who did something as he did, and as egregious in scale and in efforts, and in ideological motivation as he did, should absolutely have been punished. And he took the coward's way out, obviously. But does that mean that anybody else who was related to him should also bear the brunt of? Well, first of all, he killed his wife and kid, right? Or did he have a dog? Was a dog? I don't remember what. He didn't just kill himself, but just because anybody else was related to him doesn't mean that they should never try to be better. And I do see that as sort of a sacrifice where, it would be sad if people would descend in and say, actually, yeah, my great uncle was Hitler. My 3 times great uncle was Hitler. And I kind of have to live with that. It's like, well, no, you don't. Because we believe that man must be punished for their own sins. You are not responsible for something that your ancestor did, no matter who you are. And any inequities that is sort of causing a ripple effect throughout time, we can amend now by being acting as individuals, treating each other as individuals, because we live in an individualistic society, and that's part of the good of our civilization. As in Hitler, the children didn't want to risk it. They didn't sign a pact, but what they did is they talked amongst themselves, talked about the burden they've had in the background of their lives, and decided that none of them would marry, none of them would have children. Well, I still don't really understand what you are risking by having children, given that your uncle was a bad person. Because if this was the standard, then anybody who ever had a relative who did a bad thing should never have existed. Because their parents should have said, actually, no, because we didn't want to risk additional people doing bad things, so we're just going to cut it off right there. It's like, but then you also prevent people from having the ability to do good things, because those people will have never existed. I don't see that as a moral good, and I can't see that as a moral good, which is part of the reason why, big reason why, I find this to be a very pervasive idea. But we'll see the case that's made for it. They had their agency. They had the choice. Well, yes, it is their agency to be able to do that. I just think that it was a bad choice. Clearly, you are not preventing any evil person from existing by not having children. The only way that you can prevent evil people from existing is by being the best example as possible to everybody around you, and by teaching them good principles with which to base their own moral framework off of, so that they can actually be good people. This did not happen with Hitler, clearly, because he wasn't a good person. Any time anybody who is bad exists is because of the failures of other people to actually teach them what is good and what is bad. Now that being said, that doesn't mean that you are responsible for when people. There's sort of a line to draw. You could have prevented certain things from happening a certain way, and it's a very productive and good conversation to have to understand, well, actually, what led to the rise of power, what led to this event happening, and this culmination. Well, a lot of it was actually cultural in Germany. If it hadn't been Hitler, it may have been someone else who was close enough to him. It's fascinating. But I've heard about this a couple of times. There's a study that basically goes. There was a. It's a university, because most studies are done by universities. But this university had brought these teachers in, just teachers, and they told these teachers that they had these subjects hooked up to a machine, and this machine shocks them every single time they get a quiz, like a little trivia question wrong, and they had said that our job here as the authority here is to make you torture them no matter what. No matter how high the voltage is raised. So the people sitting down in that chair would watch the voltage raise and continue to press the button to shock them every single time that they got something wrong. And the people who were actually like hooked up to the machine, they were actors. So obviously no one was being harmed, but they were acting. And the people pressing those buttons was actually believing that that they were actually causing these people bodily harm. And due to the fact that there was an authority breathing down their neck saying, you have to do this, and there was enough people around them saying, no, this is your job in this clinical study that you have been subjected to. This is your job, that you need to continue torturing these people. They continued to torture them. 9 out of 10 of them continued to torture them all the way up to an immense amount, I believe a lethal amount, and you know, when it's lethal, it's immensely painful, of voltage being coursed through their bodies for getting trivia questions wrong. They weren't punishing them for any actual morally just reason. They were doing it because they were told to do it. And the only people who had the moral backbone to do it were 1 in 10. Now everybody likes to think that they would be. It's like, no, I would be the person in that predicament who would say, no, I wouldn't be putting up with this. This is clearly wrong. It's like, but would you though? A lot of the time, we see there's a big difference between evil, and people who are just going along to get along. Well, it's like, well, this is just the way that things are. You know, and that was the vast majority of people who actually were put on trial after World War II, who were Nazis, in Nazi Germany. You know, the SS and all sorts of people. They just sort of shrugged. They just sort of shrugged inside, and how was I supposed to do anything else? You know, and it's like, this is how scary you know, the natural man is. This is how pervasive sort of that sort of psychology is, that you can actually be convinced through societal factors that you don't want to actually do anything about it. You know, that it's like, okay, fine, like it's fine if I do this. The lengths that the mind will go to justify itself when it feels like it's under pressure, like in that situation, or especially when it's already sympathetic towards the people in power, is a big reason why you can't give power, and you have to really watch who you give power to. This is an important thing to keep in mind. Knowing crazy people would try to start a revival through their offspring, yeah, that quite possibly could be true. But I think, especially given that everybody learned from history in such a good way, there would be many people who I don't really think they would take enough of a hold. I think, you know, history is doomed to repeat itself in many ways because people end up sort of sympathizing with whatever figures. But I don't think that is a justifiable reason to say, well, there's going to be a risk in having children because you're going to be judged for the behavior of others. You know, you don't negotiate with terrorists. If somebody is going to be awful to you because of something that you never did and something that you have absolutely zero responsibility over, then you don't have an obligation to actually do what they want you to. To do as they tell you to, as they instruct and as they command you to. I misread it was his relatives, not children or his children. They were family relatives. They didn't want their bloodline to continue. They also said they knew he was evil. That kind of trauma will haunt you when you're parenting. I think that can absolutely be true, but I do also think that's part of the reason why people end up having name changes, where it's just like, well, we don't actually have to spread around the idea that we are still trying to carry on this what this name represents, because this name does not represent this name. Now everybody's going to associate with this. You know, the name Adolf is wildly unpopular in everywhere except for Muslim countries, which really appreciate Hitler for what he did because they also hate the Jews. But that's just the way that tribal warfare works, you know. and cannot will inevitably repeat a process of leading their children down a path they tried to prevent. Can't but not will. I'm not certain what the point you're trying to make is. I'll be right back. And you know what? I actually think that point, that idea is actually holds fundamental core principles with Hitler's ideology, and in many ways kind of grants more credence to him than it did than it does to any sort of a countervailing movement. You have to actually take the high road with this. Hitler said, well, your genetic because he was an absolute more than a racist, like a giga racist, like he was just like out of this world racist, right? Like he believed that you as an individual are not so much. He was a collectivist. He believed that you are responsible as a group for all of the wrongs that I perceive you to be wrong of as a group, and therefore that gives us the justification to wipe out your bloodline. I don't think that means that his bloodline should be wiped out, especially if they didn't agree with the same thing. But clearly they did agree that it was like, well, our bloodline was responsible for bringing into the world a person who did some terrible things, so we should not be continuing that bloodline any further. It's just like, well, hell no. Absolutely not, because you are only responsible for what you did yourself, and to claim like that there was some sort of a genetic. There's no Hitler gene. It's like there was nothing genetic that caused Hitler necessarily. Well, I mean, certain proclivities towards anger can absolutely be genetic. Particularly the Y chromosome could be a genetic indicator of anger and rage in many ways, but I don't think hatred necessarily has any sort of a. It's not nature, it's nurture, and if nurture had gone a bit differently, then especially in the entire culture of the country, then it would have been imploded in the way that it did. With that history and scarring your relatives, causing mass genocide, you would. What's with my throat? What's in my throat? I just knocked things down. Disaster. With that history, you will be so strict and harsh on your children, which can push them away from you. And perhaps if they want to learn about Hitler's history, they might reason in their head that Uncle wasn't evil; he was just restoring Germany, quote unquote. That pride can taint a young mind. And after the death of Hitler, you would bet that there still those followers waiting and hiding and trying to brainwash young minds like that. Hatred breeds hatred. Well, I certainly think that's true, but two wrongs don't make a right. And just because somebody used their rights poorly does not mean that other people should have their rights taken away. Germany still does not have freedom of speech. If you make Nazi jokes, if you joke about Hitler or Nazis, then you actually stand to be punished under hate speech laws that you are doing something bad. And it's just like, well, that kind of ideological fascism is exactly the type of thing that Hitler did, just in opposition to Hitler. It's like, no, you still have fundamental principles with the people that you claim to oppose. Ach, nein! Ach, nein! For goodness sake. I just want the stupid fan to like be on me proper. I think that the true way to counter it is with more speech. You don't counter speech you don't like with shut him down, which is an ideological fascism. It's an authoritarian attempt at playing God. It's just a free and open marketplace of ideas, which is inherently anti-Marxist. I don't think he ever really considered something like that, where it's like, well, he was wrong, and I can agree with you that he was wrong, and we can talk to you about why talk all about how why he was wrong. But if you cry wolf a million times, if you actually make martyrs out of other people, if the entire reason that World War II happened is because Germany was the massive scapegoat for World War One, and it led them into a massive, depression. It destroyed their country economically. The morale was at an extreme low, and Hitler took advantage of that. Found his own scapegoat in the Jews, and blamed it all on them. The entire reason that it happened was because they were made martyrs, and they thought, well, because they treated us so unfairly, we therefore have to double down on it. What it should have been is what it ended up being, after World War II, which was still difficult, but was a much better solution of sort of actually helping them to moderate, in the sense that it's just like, hey, if you try to it, like, not sort of what they had done before, where they neutered their entire economy. Things were difficult with the Berlin Wall and everything, but there was actually a really good I suppose fallout from that, for lack of a better term. Ending of World War II. Yikes. But if you make martyrs against your enemies, as I was saying before, you will not be able to. It will just validate their points further. Especially when your enemies aren't your enemies, which obviously wasn't the case in this case. But the best way to make your enemy not your enemy is to make your enemy your friend. And if you can convince somebody, then it's clearly it's going to be better than if you can then if you just victimize them. Obviously, I think there are many people where it's too far. It's like, well, clearly I can't negotiate with you when you are. This is sort of the situation that you've put into our hands. You have to be realistic about it. But if there was a free and open marketplace of ideas, then there wouldn't be sort of calls for censorship when people say offensive things. There would actually just be everybody kind of naturally gravitating toward what the best argument is. It's sort of the invisible hand, but in the capitalistic sense, but actually applied to ideas and thoughts and reason. Because if man is made to reason, and if man reasons until his reasoner is sore, then I think, especially when there is no sanctions put against each other for sort of saying awful things. Especially given that everybody has the right to say awful things, regardless of them being offensive. That's the purpose of freedom of speech. And the fact that they don't have freedom of speech kind of makes it so that they are doomed to repeat history, because they did not learn from it. They did not learn how to actually counter hateful movements by simply, like I was going to mention with Trump, it's just like, you can just take the high road, you make it worse for the political divide, the racial divide, the whatever it may be. You make it worse for everybody involved when you freak out and destroy your own credibility because you are actually like going insane. Like in that sort of a sense, that overcorrection, it gives you it makes you enemies, and it's just not worthwhile. Because of the name, they might try to kill their kids. Well, yes, but just because someone might try to kill you doesn't mean that you should make sure that you don't. Just because someone might try to kill your kids doesn't mean that you should spare them the privilege of living. Like that's inherently backwards. You're the offspring of that killer. Someone needs to pay for the price of someone needs to pay the price of someone would say, well, luckily Hitler already did that. He already paid the price for his own blood. Revenge is also a strong motivation, true, but it actually is is a bad motivation, and that is a part of the racial tribalism that we are called to overcome. That's exactly what it is just revenge in a collectivist context. Revenge is a great motivator of a lot of evil, and we got to be careful with it in cases of vigilantism as well. Even when we know that there's been a miscarriage of justice, children would have so much problems in their lives. People trying to make them into a revival of those wanting to kill those in association with Hitler. You will forever be known as the relative of a genocide killer. That title will forever be smeared on the names of kids and into adulthood. Gotta go by. Loyal, thanks for stopping by, and thanks for thanks for providing some discourse, some back and forth with me. I appreciate it. But no, I don't think that, I think it's a good reason to change the name, because it's just like, there's a reasonable risk assessment. It's like, well, should I try to hold by this name and what it used to mean to me before someone else ruined it, or should I actually just change it because I know that nobody is ever going to understand what it meant to me? That's a risk assessment that many people have made for or against. I think the clear parallel to that is the Confederate flag, where to many people, well, it means to me a symbol of my family, and this is what I was taught, and my father before him was taught about this flag, and this is a symbol that means a lot to me as a Southerner. And I say that symbol was created to represent a coalition of states who went to war and fought one of the bloodiest wars in American history. Sorry, the bloodiest war in American history, on American soil, mind you, to ensure that black people were kept enslaved. It's an inherently a tainted flag due to its history, and I don't think that that symbol should... I don't think you have anybody else to blame but yourself when people end up associating you with the original representation of what that flag, what that symbol means. This obviously doesn't apply to many things, but it entirely depends on, what is a symbol? What does a symbol mean? And what does it mean to me? And it's part of the reason why when I first saw somebody who flew the Confederate flag, or displayed it in their room, rather, not necessarily flew, but someone who clearly thought it meant something different than I thought it did. I didn't ask them, well, that's horrible. Why would you have the racial flag, the racist flag? Why would you do that? I said, what does the Confederate flag mean to you? And this might, I've been saying it for forever. I've got this like outgrowth of autism or something that causes me to have sort of this like journalistic mindset, like just sort of this journalist like gene that pops in randomly, where I for some reason just feel the urge to like ask people what they think, or who they are, or what they did, or how they feel. It's like, am I a journalist? Am I a therapist? Just like, I don't know what this is. I think it's just because I'm more so a philosopher, if anything, or at least philosophy greatly interests me. And so it's really interesting to sort of view that discussion where it's like, so you're saying that this flag means to you sort of a representation of your family. How do you feel about the representation of your family being associated with something that is, obviously horrible? It's the type of thing where it's like, well, I don't think that you think that that slavery was a good thing, but I do think that if you go back far enough, the people who originally flew that flag did believe that to be the case, and it's one of those complicated moral questions where it's like, well, I'm not going to judge you for utilizing your rights in that way. It's a freedom of expression. And I'm going to reserve my judgments for whether or not you are a good person in your head or your heart, in your mind or your heart. Because it was the Tana Mojo content cop, wasn't it? I don't think that she's a racist because I don't know what's in here and what's in here, and he points to his head and his heart. It's kind of sad that IDubbbz has ended up just backtracking on that, because it's strange. you know, I've had this idea that someone who sort of grows up a conservative kind of doesn't go away from being a conservative, can't really turn away from truly being a conservative because they were taught good, you know, true principles. So it is weird to see somebody who clearly was a conservative at some point, either profess to believe and to be leaving alone a lot of those original good conservative principles, or to actually have been convinced through whatever factors that he was wrong. It's like, no, that what you were advocating for and saying, like, you should not believe that people are racist when you don't know that when you're not literally in their heads, that you should actually be making a reasonable judgment based off of the evidence at hand, whether or not you think that they were doing something crappy, and if you think that it seems to be that it was racist, you actually have to make the case for that in your own head. And if you can't make the case for it in the affirmative, then you can't. You have to sort of dismiss it. You know, innocent until proven guilty is a fundamental aspect of our law. It's really sad that it's going by the wayside, and that the principles are being perverted for frankly evil purposes in many ways. But anyhow, I've spent long enough waffling about this. Let's actually look at the video that I've intended to respond to for the past hour and 22.
We could theoretically end all of human suffering.
You don't choose your you don't choose your vocal cords, okay? But he's a child of God, okay? He's a child of God. Let's start out with that, all right?
We could theoretically end all of human suffering.
Yes, just because you can, I'm gonna shoot you, and it's like, well, at least the cancer's gone. The good news is, you don't have to worry about dying of cancer. The bad news is you're dead. It's like, yes, obviously that would be the case, but you would be throwing out the baby with the bathwater. This has been something that's been dismissed for forever, so please, like, get a better point than this. Like, come on. Like, I know it's literally 3 seconds, but it's like, how are you supposed to have an honest, like is the idea that he's trying to steel man the argument, or is he supposed, like, I don't know, I guess we'll see.
With one generation. More realistically, a few generations, but one is all that is required. Now, here's more realistic.
What does that mean?
Realistically, a few generations, but one is all that is required.
Great silent generation, greatest generation, one is all that's required. Realistically, a few generations. Why would realistically it would take, like, realistically as in it's not possible for everybody in the society to believe that it is a good thing that everybody should be intentionally sterilizing themselves, voluntarily sterilizing themselves, making themselves celibate? That sounds remarkably fascistic, dude. Like, realistically, it'd take a couple of generations, because we couldn't chop them all off the same block. But theoretically, we could do it in one. It's like, this is why I had the concern upon initially seeing the video, that I was like, when is this going to be voluntary? When is this going to actually be voluntary? 99,000 upvotes.
Now, here's the catch. The solution is not all that clever. Extinction would end all human suffering.
That's certainly true.
Now, there's a reason I say a generation. When I say extinction, I'm not talking about some numbnut starting a nuclear war, or some
nuclear war, okay? Clearly this guy has never had a visit from the nuclear ninja.
Cosmic event, like a gamma ray burst occurring randomly and destroying our ozone layer in seconds, exposing all life on Earth to deadly amounts of ultraviolet radiation, or an alien civilization that views humans as nothing but pests. No, this is extinction without any violence, any killing, or against anybody's will.
This is not possible. A solution like this can only ever be theoretical, because you will never be able to convince every lost person on Earth of every single walk of life that they should never have any children. You can't do that. You cannot convince everybody to do so, and therefore it can never be voluntary. It's just not possible. Like, I don't see why this is something that actually is, because all this is like some sort of a pipe dream or something of people who are just like, oh, if everybody decided that we weren't going to bring in another life to the world because it's too cruel, because we will subject them to inherent suffering. Just because you are suffering does not mean, and obviously this is born from a cultural nihilism and a pessimism and a misery that comes out of feeling purposeless, but just because you are struggling does not mean that you should die, or does not mean that you should never have anybody else live, and does not mean, especially, that your life was not worth anything, and in fact, it is actually given its worth by the fact that you struggled and you persevered. That is praiseworthy. That is a good thing. And the more difficult it is, how much more rewarding is it that you did actually, in the end, see it through to the end and persevere? How is that not the clear argument to this? You know, why is there any purpose to even having this discussion when we know that it can, first of all, can only ever be theoretical? Because there are still going to be people on the earth who say, well, great, if you want to kill yourselves, that's fine. I'm just going to reap the benefits of still being able to live here, and you're going to be gone, and you won't have, you won't be able to, I will have one more person out of the way of my interests. I can think of many people and cultures who would absolutely be like, well, hey, now I don't have to deal, like, if, let's say the entire West did it. It's like, what do you think the East would do? Well, obviously they would immediately move over and say, well, everything of worth is now ours. We can move our people over to the West. We can, all the land is ours. All of the cultural hegemony is ours. And it's like people who see that things are good kind of have a responsibility to actually, show how good it is, or at least show their work, show their reasoning in seeing how things are good. And I think in the same sense, through negativity, I just don't think that there's any rational, any good lesson that can be taken from this, other than obviously that this is intense falsehood. And that there's no possibility for this to ever happen in a meaningful, non-fascistic, good way. I think I think humanity being on the earth is at large a good thing. Like, if it wasn't, then I don't think we would have purpose in being here. We would also just still be in, like, I don't know, Garden of Eden or whatever. Or we just never would have came into fruition. We never would have existed. And that's the thing. Even if every single human being ceased to exist, there are still bonobos. There are still chimpanzees. There are still gorillini. There are still loads of other animals who, like, I actually do believe that raccoons would eventually evolve into some sort of a intelligent creature if that supposedly was the way that things, I think they could. Just because they could doesn't mean they will, because I do also believe in guided evolution. But it's like doozy.
Extinction from the result of everyone on Earth agreeing not to have any more children.
If everybody on Earth could agree on any one thing, it should be that having children is a good thing. You're not going to get everybody to agree with that, and you're going to get people to disagree with that in different ways, where it's like, well, yes, it's a good thing to have children if you are of this race that I approve of, because I want more children of this race. I want this race to persevere over this one because I love tribal warfare, because I'm full of vices and no virtue, like, you cannot get everybody to agree on anything. And if that were the case, that we could all agree on something, it's probably that life is hard. But just because life is hard doesn't mean that it's not worth living.
Antinatalism.
I genuinely am kind of wondering if this thought process actually causes people to kill themselves. Because it's so nihilistic and so miserable. like, I don't know.
Is the idea that procreation is morally wrong. For many of
The
you,
evil
that may
idea.
sound like nothing more than absurd pessimism.
It
An idea
is.
born out of the mind of an emo teenager that didn't get enough hugs as a kid.
Well, I think it may appeal to emo teenagers, but I don't think it was born out of the mind of emo teenagers. But probably predates emo teenagers significantly.
An idea that is so clearly wrong and so clearly backwards, it requires no further contemplation. However,
That's what I'm saying.
antinatalism, as simple as its premise is, contains much more than meets the eye, and the philosophy
Really?
around it brings up a lot of interesting questions.
Really?
The discussions and
Because, you know, simply talking about it obviously has led me to a lot of interesting discourse along the way. Obviously, I've been trying to actually breach the topic for a hour and a half at this point, but it's like having one fewer child will save 58.6 tons of CO2 equivalent per year. And how much is that going to have a dent in reality? Live car free, avoid one round trip transatlantic flight. One round trip? What does this have to do with anything? So we should have less people on the Earth, because we can reduce carbon emissions by having less people on the Earth. I can think of many people who believe that. They're wrong.
writings of the people who advocate for it, along with those of the people who are against it, say a
Do people actually advocate for this? Like, how is this a thing that people actually advocate for, especially when they know that it's impossible? Why would you ever advocate for something that is completely impossible? Like, I suppose... No, I suppose it's okay to advocate for something that is impossible because, I advocate for everybody to be as virtuous as they possibly can be. I do know it's impossible because everybody's imperfect and they can't be perfect. But to advocate for it is to shoot for higher principles, shoot for the moon, you'll land among the stars. I don't think that the stars, landing among the stars equals having less kids. I don't think that's a good thing for the world.
lot about how we think about and value morality, rationality, logic, duty, and life itself. As you can imagine, the subjects I'm going to explore get extremely dark, so those who are not sound of mind or are made uncomfortable by these kinds of conversations, I would advise to click off this video. I'll also have to add
Those who are not sound of mind? Or are made uncomfortable by these types of conversations? I mean, anybody can find these sorts of conversations to be uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean that they should never consider these types of difficult questions. Difficult questions are the exact basis of all of our philosophy, is trying to find the answer to difficult questions that may be uncomfortable. So that's an interesting attitude.
ask you to leave any knee-jerk reactions at the door, as this subject messes with some of our most primal drives, and
Right, which I suppose is part of the reason why I've ranted about things for a long time. Obviously, this is a good appeal to just we have to take the emotion out of it. We have to talk rationally about things. I still don't think that talking rationally about this is going to bring much progress, because it's a pipe dream that is silly, stupid, morally wrong, all of the things that he said, so I don't know.
obviously many people
still
will
skeptical.
foster a lot of prejudgment without hearing about what antinatalism actually entails.
And I do.
I'm going to present
What it actually entails. Didn't you already describe what it actually entails? Like I agree with him that there is a automatic bias going in where it's just well, obviously that's nonsense. So clearly that applies to me, but I don't see how it's well, no, it actually entails. What more could it possibly actually entail? What am I missing
antinatalism
so
as
far?
objectively as I can. The arguments and ideas about antinatalism are
Is this really the guy that we're going to take seriously? I mean, not because wearing things makes you any less. I don't know. He looks kooky. Let's just leave it at that. I'd take this guy with a massive grain of salt because what's wrong with his hair?
antinatalism as objectively as I can. The arguments and ideas about
Oh, there's just the
antinatalism are
angle.
fascinating in a morbid way. If you're optimistic about life and still open-minded, you may find this as an interesting counter-perspective on an issue most people
like
don't
that
even
B-roll.
question. And if you're one of those
Debate.
people who wish they'd never been born, you might find comfort in the fact that you're not alone.
Isn't the fact that you have comfort with people who also are sad more of a moral impetus that should more of a motivation to live? Isn't knowing that you're not alone, isn't being comforted part of the reason why you should go on, why you should continue to go into the fray of the unknown of what the future of your life will be, and to just see how things go? Just give it a try. Like I don't really see how it's like, yes, I am more optimistic, but I do find it interesting because it'll give you more ideas. But someone who wish they were never born, I think everybody at some point in their lives were like, oh, if I hadn't been born, then I wouldn't have dealt with all this. It's explored very fantastically in Calvin and Hobbes. It's like he's having a bad day or whatnot. I wish everyone was dead. Well, no, I didn't wish. I wish I was dead. Well, no, I didn't wish I was dead, because then I wouldn't have like all the fantastic things. I just wish everyone else was dead, because then I'd have everything fantastic. And especially due to that being an aspect of human nature, shown through the lens of the perspective of a 7-year-old boy. He's 7, right? Not 9, not 6. I don't know. It's part of human nature. It's part of why that this theory, this idea can only fail.
Antinatalism is not unprecedented.
Yeah, save the earth, prevent birth. This is a evil idea. It truly is backwards and evil. Like I have nothing else more to say about it. Like I think the first time that I had actually been introduced to this idea is like probably when I was a teenager, and I watched the old Saturday's Warrior, which, if you don't know, is a Mormon film produced, I believe, in Provo. But it's one of the things that zero population is the answer, my friends. It's like this. That was bad, but it's literally like. It literally is an antenatal message that the kid takes, but it's actually done in the sense where it actually counters that message in the end, where it's like, well, wait a minute, like I have a really good reason to be alive, as I'm sort of getting closer to finding meaning in the gospel, which is a good message, I think, but it. Obviously, that can sort of characterize a bias in me and make it a little more clear. But cards on the table here. I clearly have an ideology that is in direct opposition to this.
Even in the Bible, there are a few passages
course.
that allude to the idea, but most do not endorse it.
And incredibly. I think all of these are probably pro-life messages, right? Like, why did I not perish at birth and die as I came from the womb? That was Job, okay? This is from Job. Like, this was a man who had every right to be as hopeless as he possibly could be. And that's part of the reason why this stuff is in the Bible, is because it actually serves as an interesting thought experiment with which to teach people of all ages that it's like, well, you've thought about these things before. You've had questions about these things before. How did they solve it? How did they solve it in these situations? Sort of using them as you can look at them as Aesop fables in a way where it's like, well, this is the moral issue, and this was the answer to that moral issue. Job felt very hopeless, and he had good reason to feel very hopeless, but he put his faith and was optimistic in the end by putting his faith and deriving his meaning from serving God. Why was I not hidden away in the ground like a stillborn child, like an infant who never saw the light of day? Like, he was asking why. He was like, why didn't I end up in that situation? Why did God let me live so that I could experience this horrible stuff? And why didn't he just let me die in the beginning so I didn't have to experience it? If I am going to just return to dust from whence I came, then why is it that I had to be here in the first place? This moral question is a really good question to be considering, and the fact that he asks that question is actually the fact that it's a question where it's like, it's not I wish I was hidden away in the ground. It was, why was I not? What is the purpose for my suffering? Because there must be a purpose. It's not just meaningless. It's actually an anti-nihilist, anti-antinatalist message. It's not saying he should have. It's saying, and I think he did concede this, that it's like, well, it doesn't actually advocate for the idea. It just acknowledges the perspective that many can have when they're in the depths of despair.
The cliffs of despair.
And I declared that the dead who had already died are happier than the living who are still alive. But better than both is the one who has never been born, who has not seen the evil that is done under the sun. This sounds to me like it may be poorly translated, because it doesn't really sound right. That's not remarkably objective, but I take a lot of Bible verses with a grain of salt, because I don't, we believe the Bible to be the Word of God so long as it is translated correctly. And I think in many ways, many verses in the Bible and the wordings thereof have been tainted due to how old the Bible is, and due to intentional means to twist the words within it. Still a lot of truth in it, but not as much, especially when you are reading a certain version that is not really faithfully translated. So that doesn't really sound right. It's just like, well, the person who is dead no longer has to suffer. So if we should die before our journey's through, happy day, all is well. We then are free from toil and sorrow too. With the just we shall dwell. Just, he says just. The hymn says just, right? Either way, it's the idea where it's just like, well, don't be sad, because there is actually hope beyond the veil. That's not really an anti-natalist message at all, because it's like, well, you lived and now you don't have to suffer anymore. And it's sad to see you go, but we're happy that you're in a better place now. That's a hopeful message. But having not, I have a feeling that this, because this just doesn't seem right. In the very least, I don't agree with this. And I already don't believe the Bible to be an infallible document, because it has been tainted by the touch of imperfect men. But has not seen the evil that is done under the sun. I don't think it's better than both, the one who has never been born. I think everybody who hasn't been born, and obviously this is a theological perspective, but I think everybody who has been born itches to get down here. Everybody who has not yet been born really hopes to be able to have that crack at it. Because it's worth living, because it's so worth living, in fact. But I don't think that pro-life message is really supporting of this narrative, obviously. Jesus turned and said to them, and obviously this sentence doesn't support that, but I don't think that sentence is actually true. And I suppose I could look up, and perhaps I shall look up the King James Version of... Come on. This is going to take ages to load, as per usual. Ecclesiastes 4:2-3. Before our journey's through, happy day, all is well. This is going to take too long. I'm not going to waste the time to do that. King James Version. Let me see. I declared that the dead. So already we're dealing with a different translation, because we were seeing I declared. Come on. Why didn't this just load? I hate stupid Windows apps. Like, I swear they're just so broken. So, whoops, I hit a single button. Here we are, though. And I declare that the dead who had already died are happier than the living who are still alive, but better than both as one yet. So I declared that the dead. Wherefore I praised the dead. Praised and declared are two very different words. I'm assuming that this is the KJ. Yeah, this is KJV. But you can see I congratulated the dead. I praised the dead. I turned my attention to all the outrageous violence that takes place on this planet. The tears of the victims, no one to comfort them. The iron grip of the oppressors, no one to rescue the victims from them. I congratulated the dead. It's like that was not in anywhere in this original verse. Like, people who actually know Hebrew are able to read Hebrew and say, actually, that word does not mean this. Like, KJV is what I believe is as close as possible to the proper translation, but I still don't think it's like necessarily perfect. I mean, it gets really interesting when you can actually read and understand the Hebrew Bible in conjunction with like King James or whatever other versions. Luckier than the dead, like luckier, like a lot of these words have such meaning that it, like, when you have this much out of it, you are not actually faithfully translating it anymore. You are interpreting it to mean something, rather than taking the words to be what they literally mean. Wherefore I praise the dead, which are already dead, more than the living, which are yet alive. So it's like I praise the dead that are already dead. The ones who are already dead, I praise more than the living, that still live. Better is he than both they, which hath not yet been, who hath not seen the evil work that is done under the sun. I don't know. Perhaps I would interpret that in a different way, where it's like, did it say the work that is done? The evil work that is done under the sun. The evil that is done under the sun. I suppose that there is evil work is, works, actions, because actions can be evils. Sort of removing that word is kind of important. But I would more interpret that to mean, better is the one, it's like, he hasn't seen the evil, but neither has he seen any of the good. So there's no actual way to understand how good things can be. I don't know, that's an interesting moral question for sure. Jesus turned and said unto them, Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, weep for yourselves and for your children, for the time will come when you will say, Blessed are the childless women, the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed. That doesn't sound particularly pro-life. I don't really like the sound of that. 23, 28 through 30. Luke 23, 28 through 30. Whoops. I put the colon in the wrong place. Yeah, this is the NIV. I really dislike the NIV because it adds so much that was not said. Much a disagreement that I have with that. But Jesus turning unto them said, Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children, for behold, the days are coming in the which, because I think it's just, wording, when you will say, because I saw when you, and I was like, that isn't, you is not generally said in the Bible. In the which they shall say, Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bear, and the paps which never gave suck. Yeah, I mean, there is a reason why translation happens. Is like, well, we don't use those words anymore. But I do also think that it's useful to know how those words work. Then shall they begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. It's an interesting... I wonder what that means. Because, you know, blessed are the barren. Like, I don't think that's necessarily a good thing overall. And the wombs that never bear. It's like the paps which never gave suck. I think you know, Aristotle would disagree with this from an Aristotelian. Is that how? Is that even the right way? I don't know. From Aristotle's point of view, it's like, well, what makes something good is its ability to do what it was intended to do, you know, to achieve its purpose as is equivalent to its design. So, you know, a womb is created, is designed to give birth. So, you know, fundamentally, it's not a very, it's sort of a waste of potential that you wouldn't be using it to do something with it. That would more or less be kind of a sad thing, that it's like, well, you just kind of let it, you let that tool sit there and grow dust. You know, I suppose it's sort of a different situation entirely, that when you are born with that tool inherently built in, but it's a very important moral question, where it's like, well, I did have this. Why do I have this? Why was I given this? What is the purpose of this, you know? I don't know. It's interesting.
That allude to the idea, but most do not endorse it. Probably the most famous is Matthew 26:24, "For the Son of Man must die, as the scriptures declared long ago." I
really, really dislike NIV. Like, it just doesn't have anywhere near the same amount of, like, truth to it. Sorry, I was talking about the Hebrew Bible for a moment. The New Testament was written in Latin, I believe. But, you know, point still stands.
Terrible it would be for the one who betrays him. It would be far better for that man if he had never been born.
Well, so in my theological perspective, this actually refers to somebody who has forsaken, you know, they've actually forsaken the what they knew to be true, because they betrayed him. You know, like I actually would think that would mean outer darkness. You know, but basically you become one of the sons of perdition by doing that, because you knew it to be true, and you decided to betray the truth that you knew anyway, which is such a serious sin that it is theologically considered to be unpardonable. But let me see, Matthew 26:24. 24. What is King James Version? I don't want any of your what is ESV? All of these different translations. Hello, Adrian. How do you do? Let us see. The Son of Man goeth as it is written of him. There's already like such a different definition. But woe unto that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It had been good for that man if he had not been born. Because I suppose that's effectively the exact same meaning. But I truly think that actually means that it's like, well, you used your agency in such a way that caused such an extreme eternal consequence, that if you had not been born, then you wouldn't have that extreme consequence. But then again, you also would not have had the agency. It's part of the reason why the New Testament, I don't think is actually sufficient. It doesn't contain the fullness of the gospel, because this is one of those questions that's actually really confusing. Really makes you think. Hi, you wanted to call? I want to read the Geneva Bible. Is that a thing? Is that what is that? Das Bibel version information. All but forgotten today, the Geneva Bible was most widely read and influential English Bible from 16th and 17th centuries. When the Bible was taken to America on the Mayflower, Mary First Queen of England. All but forgotten today. Like, so we actually don't have like the entire Bible, do we? That's very interesting. most historically significant translation of the Bible into English, preceding the King James Version by 51 years. Interesting. Used by William Shakespeare, Oliver Cromwell, John Knox, John Donne. Its frontispiece inspired Franklin's design for the first Great Seal of the United States. Really? It's quite interesting. It's before King James. Yeah. Very interesting. I'd not remembered. Clearly didn't remember that part of the American history. But yeah, I mean, if you want to call in, see, the trouble is that obviously you remember some of the complications that we had last time. There may be even more complications again, but if you would like to join in, that would be fantastic. We do be turning on the PC based. Let's hit the button then. Because now I'm gonna have to figure out.
You hear me?
I can. Let me figure out. I like to. If I have like Firefox audio, then
I saved hundreds
that way I can get it.
with Liberty Mutual.
Crap.
Liberty,
It's
Liberty,
got ads.
Liberty.
So, what I was thinking is you could play the video,
Mm.
and then after I could call, and we can talk.
Well, that's the trouble. Is I'm constantly pausing it, so it kind of defeats the purpose.
I think if I can type fast, I can text fast. Because, well, yeah, no, I can text fast. I'll just text fast.
I've fixed it. I've gotten to the solution here. I hope it's not too the video's not too low, but I've done it. Because then I can just like screen share and it should be fine.
I'm gonna put this right here. I want to buy this badly.
What is it? Walmart.
It's the Geneva.
Oh, goodness.
I know it's Walmart,
so I didn't see the embed, so I was like,
Yeah.
it's just a link to me. Oh, okay. The Geneva Bible. Yes.
Yeah, because it has
That is pretty classy.
yeah, there is a just to make this real quick. A TikToker that compares the King James versus Geneva, and there's different, and in my opinion, better interpretations of the Bible. So that's why I'm interested in it. So let's
interesting.
do this. Let's
Very
get this.
interesting. Yeah, I'd be interested in seeing sort of the differences between the King James and the Geneva, because in my belief is that a significant portion of the truth contained in the Bible has been lost due to the fact that it has been translated by imperfect people. And there were some people who intentionally twisted the words to mean one thing or another, but also that it was intended for the times that it was intended, that it was revealed in, and that the fullness of the gospel is not contained within it. There's much truth in it, but there was still more truth for us to have revealed unto us effectively. So part of the reason why it's like, there's some of the things I see in the Bible where I'm like, I don't know if I believe that, because I think the standard is more nuanced than that, or perhaps that was like twisted in one way or another, which is part of the reason why I've chosen to look into this video. But can you hear this?
26:24. For the Son of Man must die, as the scripture
Okay, good
Scriptures
stuff.
declared long ago, but how terrible it would be for the one who betrays him. It would be far better for that man if he had never been born.
What is your interpretation of that?
I'm sorry. Could you translate this? I'm sorry.
See, because my interpretation of this is, Son of Man means Jesus Christ. The one who betrays him means Judas. But I suppose not just Judas, but also just the idea of a Judas as a cautionary tale, where it's just like, well, if you have a testimony, take off your watch. We had this issue last time.
Oh shoot!
I'm
Wait,
I'm
no.
literally like Doctor Strange out here. You remember that part? He has to cover his watch.
No, this is my Steel series.
Oh, was it that?
Oh, I know what's going on. It's
I
gonna
remember
bug
there
out for a
being a.
bit.
That's
It's
all
gonna
right.
bug out. Yeah, it's gonna bug out for a bit, but give me a second. I'm still gonna hear you though. So
Gotcha.
I'm gonna just mute myself.
No trouble. Um, but yeah, I'd assume that, sort of Judas individually, but also like Judas as a cautionary tale, of like, you know, the Son of Man must die, as the scriptures declared long ago. It's just like Jesus Christ the reason why he came is so that he would die. But the one who betrays him, being, I think that's kind of intentional wording, where it's like, it's not saying, but woe be unto Judas. Obviously the King James version words it a bit differently, but it's like, it's not saying woe be unto Judas, it's saying the one who betrays him. It's sort of using Judas as a cautionary tale, where it's saying, due to the severe consequences of the eternal consequences of somebody who betrays what they know to be true, in the case of someone like Judas, then that eternal consequence would actually, it would be better, eternally speaking, if he had not been born, because him making that decision caused significant eternal harm to him, in the end. Like I think that's what that's saying, is that you end up being sort of it's what is called in many Christian sects as the unpardonable sin. Is that actually in many Christian sects? I'm not certain, but
Damn,
it's like,
I misread it for a second, but oh, is there interference? I did a little switch up.
I can still hear you. I swear we had thought it was like
Is it a
like
tick?
a watch.
Is
Yeah,
it a
it's literally, it sounds like a watch. It sounds like,
Oh yeah, so that's not my watch. I don't know what it is. It's something with Steel Series. You're just gonna have to turn me down.
cringe.
Actually, the most I could do is turn my gain down. I'd never figured this out. Like I've done so much to try to fix this. But anyway, so
Rip Steel Series.
yeah.
I don't recall if we had, before, like, we tried to swap to another mic. I don't know what we did.
Okay, so my gain's now lower. So that noise should be lower, but it's not gonna
It's really
get rid of
not.
it.
I don't know. I don't know if in post my like noise suppressor would actually target it. Maybe not. But
Let me see your stream real quick. I hate this noise too.
yeah, no, it's kind of cringe.
My audio sounds doubled.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
I totally
gonna
forgot about
continue
that. That's my bad.
Test.
Can you hear that?
Okay, it's normal. And I don't hear the ticking.
How
so,
do you not
sorry.
hear that?
Well, I don't hear it in your stream. At least. Do you hear it in your stream?
I hear it in my ears right now.
I'm sorry. Does it bother you that much? Well, we'll listen to your stream real quick. Let's see if you can hear it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I can still hear it.
In the stream?
Yeah, it's there. I don't know why you're not hearing it, but it's,
You know what? Fuck this. I'm bringing out my fucking
yeah. Whip out
Yeti.
the other mic. I'll be
Oh
right
my
back.
god. You know what? I'm gonna have to mute. I'm so sorry about this. In the meantime, chat away. I'm just gonna have you on my phone speaker. I'm gonna mute on Discord though.
I have returned. I don't know if I didn't hear what you had said last, so I don't know if you're if you can still hear me or not. But I suppose I'll just carry on.
Sorry about that. I'm just setting up my mic. I'm gonna have you on my speaker. I was
gotcha.
finding my wire for my Blue Yeti, so
Gotcha.
yeah. So continue with your interpretation, basically.
Okay, sorry, just had a couple of things to do. Yep. I mean, I think I basically finished what I was saying, what I was thinking about with when it comes to that particular situation.
Today,
That verse.
Catholic nuns and priests are not allowed to get married or have children. A similar antinatalist sentiment has been made.
Well, they're not going to have children or get married because it's like not for the same reason, not because it's like, well, it'd be cruel to me to bring another child into the world. It's because there's like a devotion to the actual priestcraft in a sense, right? It's like, well, to show my devotion to God, I have chosen to sacrifice my ability to do this so that I can better serve Him, or something to that favor. I actually don't believe that is a good practice for many reasons. And there was a story, I forget what his name is, but there was a priest that I ended up leaving the priesthood entirely so that he could get married. And obviously the Catholic Church wasn't really happy about that because it's against their ideals. But I do actually believe that there is much benefit to be had in this life of marrying and having children. So it's like, don't knock it.
Made by
I don't know.
Sophocles, and wishing never to have been born is even a line in one of Queen's most been
What
made by.
did Sophocles say? Never to have been born is best, but if we must see the light, the next best is quickly returning whence we came. So he's advocating for suicide? When youth departs with all its follies, who does not stagger under evils? Who escapes them? Youth departs with all its follies. I mean that there is wisdom in that, where everybody staggers under evils. When youth departs, you go from being a fool to being, or you're trying to be wiser, you're trying to be older, you're trying to be wise, you're trying to be better, but you always fall short. You always stagger under evils. You're never going to be perfect at doing it. But I don't think that necessarily is an argument in favor of, I don't know.
Okay.
I guess it does start
Can you hear
out
me?
with that idea. I can.
Is there ticking?
I don't hear anything this time. I think you're good.
This is my Yeti. I fucking dusted the dust off of it
Yeti
or whatever.
moment.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeti
So
moment.
my interpretation. Do you still want to talk about the Matthew 26-24?
Yes.
So, at first, I misunderstood it. I thought it was saying that he who betrays his son might as well not be born, which is kind of like saying, like, if the father's damned as a man, if he's betraying the Lord, his kids might as well not be born. And I don't believe in death so much.
Well, I don't
as
think it
so,
says
like,
anything about his kids.
Yeah, no. But I think it's a decent tie-in. My misinterpretation. I don't believe death to be something physical. You know what I mean? I think it's more mental and spiritual. Let me give an example.
I mean, it is physical, but it's more importantly spiritual.
Yeah. So what I believe it's saying, it's like he might as well, because his life is going to be filled with suffering, and I think this death it's a mindset, it's a mental thing. Do you really think Judas was if there's a man who betrays somebody as good to them as Jesus was, do you think they are in the best of place mentally? You know what I mean? They're damned. You might as well be dead.
Right. It's like it would be preferable not to be damned than to be damned. So therefore, if you hadn't lived, you wouldn't be damned. But you did live, and therefore you are damned. So it would have been better if
Yeah.
you weren't born. I think that is definitely along the lines of what it's saying.
You would suffer less. Yeah, and I'm not saying, oh, you just should die. Nah, like, I mean, I wish, like, there's a situation where they could have, you know, approached him so he might have changed his ways, but man, it's so hard to change.
Possibly, but I think it's also important to understand that you know, it serves a purpose to show people falling short, especially when that, I mean, everybody in Judeo-Christian society that is revered for them overcoming, that they overcame the evils, not that they had the evils there. It's like, well, no, that you're not special for having the evils. You're special in overcoming them. And the reason why we look back to anybody in history is that, well, there were clearly evils there, but they overcame them in this, and this way, and that is what is praiseworthy, and that's what makes life worth living. That's what we should strive to do, is to overcome evil in as good and in as significant as a way as possible. It's like, you know, Peter, it ends up being very like beloved because, you know, not because he denied Christ 3 times, but because he saw the error of his ways. You know, because he spent the rest of his life sort of repenting of his where he had fallen short. So it's, you know, it's definitely hard to say that anybody was perfect, but well, I mean, it's impossible to say that anybody was perfect except for Christ in that sense. But it is interesting to, I mean, I think it's important to consider.
I think that's something that's amazing that's done in the Bible, is how it represents change and how it's possible. I think.
Well, it gives hope to an otherwise hopeless and meaningless world. Hope and meaning is what is produced by religion that I don't think it can ever really be manufactured by mankind.
Yeah, that's something I was gonna bring up too, because it's hard when it comes to change. I think I'm going through something in my life right now where I need it, and I'm actually getting closer. I'm trying to get closer with God. You know, I want to say for that Bible, 1, and then 2, there's this YouTube channel that like lets me listen to audios of like certain scriptures. Right now I'm on Isaiah. I've always liked Isaiah because I've always prayed for
I love
and
Isaiah.
received strength. 'Cause that's what that book's all about, honestly. It's just strength, you know, and it's taken me a long way, to be honest. So, yeah,
I think that's a pretty good thing. It's a
yeah,
good
I think
development.
the one disappointment in myself, even going to church as a teen or preteen, I hated how I was not, like, I knew I could have. I knew people who knew the Bible front to back. Like you named them, like, oh, 26, 24, and they would know the exact verse. I was disappointed that I didn't know that, and I knew if I contributed and put the time in, I could have done that. So I kind of want to do that now, because it's kind of like a why not situation.
Right.
I have the time, I have the money, and I've always wanted to do this too. It's just like read it and then learn my or think of my interpretation, write it down, and then look up the actual interpretation, because there's plenty of forms online, and hopefully have discussions with you and other fellow Christians, or whatever I am, because I don't identify with the specific religion. I don't know if that's bad, but
Well, I suppose it depends on the reason why. Because I mean, if you have what I would say is the definition of a Christian is if you believe in Christ, then you are a Christian. Like, that is just the definition of a Christian. Whether or not you believe that he said different things, or what those things meant, how that's interpreted, you know, that's a different discussion entirely. Many people think that because you're not my specific brand of Christian, then therefore you aren't Christian at all, and it's just like, well, no, it's ridiculous. If the standard is you believe in Christ, therefore you're a Christian, then I can agree with that. But categorically, if you're saying, well, you're not a Lutheran, it's like, yeah, I'm not a Lutheran, but I am a Christian. It's like there's different ones. We should be able to all agree on at least that some basic fundamental ideas about Christ as a figure that is to be imitated. If only because you can get common ground with many people to say, well, yeah, the idea of Christ as sort of the perfect person is something that everybody should be striving to become.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, who's to say like I'm a better Christian? It's just like, what if like my ideals follow a church?
Like you don't want to be
think-
tied down to a specific denomination because you feel like you'd have to answer for them.
Yeah, it's kind of it's the same with like politics. Like that's why I don't want to identify with a certain political group because like I'm not gonna follow everything that they're gonna say.
I think the important delineation to make is that a political party, a church, whatever it may be, they are a vehicle for a movement in a sense. More so for a political party. A political party is a vehicle for a movement. Sometimes the person who's driving that party, driving that vehicle, is not somebody you want to actually, get on that. I don't like where you're driving this thing, and you're driving a little bit crazy. A vehicle is only as useful as it is in its use to bring you to a destination, and if that destination is not the destination that you wish to go to, then obviously that's kind of the point where you sort of disown it, where it's just like, hey, I've got to cut my losses eventually. This is not what I stand for. But understanding that just because you, see a useful political tool as in a party as a vehicle, doesn't mean that you are responsible for every single other person who also purports to want to use that tool as well. They may not actually share the same values as you, and it's important to actually say, hey, if we're going to be driving in this car, everybody in this ride is going to have to agree with me on what the values are, so we actually can agree on where we're going. So I think that kind of applies to all sort of political parties in the philosophical sense, but with churches in a similar way, where it's like, well, this entire a church is simply a vehicle so that I can actually further the gospel in my life, spread the gospel into others' lives so that it can benefit them. It's like that is sort of the purpose of it, so that I can bring meaning to myself and to others via the gospel. It's like the gospel in and of itself is the end, and the church, the denomination, is the mean. So it's not like it's a so why the very first article of faith for Mormons is, we believe that man must be punished for their own sins, and not for Adam's transgression, but specifically that for their own sins. It's like, well, hey, just because I'm part of this group, just because I'm in the car doesn't mean I agree with everybody who's driving it every single time it's being driven. I am accountable for myself and myself only. An important fundamental principle that is derived in many a way from a Judeo-Christian thought.
Right. Yeah, I think identity is something that I'm currently trying to I'm trying to customize and focus on. I don't know if I already said this, but I'm trying to focus on change right now. I think my last
What's that?
my last massive
You're cutting
change
out a little bit. You might want to
Oh,
dial back
I
or
was
turn off
doing
your
something.
Oh, okay. I was just like,
I was-
is noise suppression
Yeah.
doing a thing? Are we being
Yeah,
funny?
I was like opening up a cap, but
Pop a cap.
yeah. So my last major change was in 2020, and I don't know. I think I'm just in route for a change. So that's why I'm trying to get more into religion. That's why I'm trying to change and update more habits, because I don't know. It's just something that I want to solidify my identity. I feel like I've been kind of like on a raft, not really rowing it.
Well, I think it certainly is a good thing to do to see yourself in sort of a stagnant place, and then to try to better yourself as pursuing truth, and thus following true principles as much as you can, so that you can actually so that you can have joy and achieve your purpose and find joy in achieving that purpose. The provision of meaning and of hope to people is sort of the purpose of a gospel in really any sense, I suppose.
Yeah.
A lot of
I don't
times
know
the
if you wanna-
gospels of man end up, going in a different direction. That's sort of what the topic here in this video is a particular gospel of man that I don't think has enough truth to it, frankly.
I mean, if you want, we can continue with the video so we can speak more about it.
I think that's a good idea.
By Sophocles, and wishing never to have been born is even a line in one of Queen's most
Right.
famous songs. The
Of course.
sentiment that one should never have been born has probably been a recurring idea throughout all of human history. Given the amount of suffering in today's world,
I mean, there might be a name for it, like other than like antinatalism specifically, like just the idea of the question. Like, I know that the name for the idea of if God exists, why does he let bad things happen? That's called that debate is called theodicy. Like, so I'm almost certain that there's a name for it because it's existed for so long. So, where is this?
That's what I was trying to figure out too.
GeoGuessr. Yeah, that looks awful. That looks miserable.
It's either
I'm guessing Middle
South
East.
America, or yeah, no, it's South, it maybe South,
Like,
South
because
America.
it reminds me of some of what what Syria looked like, just the massive bombing and
Yeah, this looks like
destruction.
there's some explosion going on there. I don't know why I ignored that. That's horrible.
Yeah,
That's
it
horrifying.
was pretty horrible.
and the even greater suffering of the past, one could see how someone in any time period could come to the conclusion that existence itself is bad, and the perpetuation of that existence is bad. If a few societies
Wait, what
itself
is
is
that,
bad, and the
World population and population projections. High scenario, medium scenario, low scenario. Well, where are we? Because it's like, I don't know, if we are between the year 2000 and the year 2050, like, where is actual, like, present day supposed to be on this graph? It says this is 2004, so they were, like, right here. We should already be able to sort of trace what our projection should be.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it is quite interesting. Human geography does show, the data does show that people in wealthier countries tend trend towards having less children, which there's I forget what exactly it is, but basically if the average female, I don't think it's carrying capacity, but if every female by average has 2 children, the population will be even, or maybe it's like if it's, I think it might be 1.5 or something. I don't know, like the average amount of children, if it's at 2, then it's even. If it's at 2.5, then it's increasing. If it's at less than 2, then it's decreasing. And it's like you can, human geography, you can organize each and measure each country by the average amount of children per women, and you see it's like, well, the West is shrinking, being for whatever reason there seems to be correlation, if not causation, between the West having less children and being more affluent, being more wealthy and developed, whereas less developed countries tend to have a massive amount of children per woman in comparison, so their population naturally balloons as a result. But I'm not certain if that necessarily means that there's like some sort of moral equivalence between having children and causing suffering, because if you own every single good or bad thing that is done by anybody that you give birth to, which I think there should be a certain amount of responsibility to have with that. Otherwise, there would be no moral like urging to actually do something well, to actually teach your children well. You should feel a tad bit responsible for the way that your children think and behave and feel, especially in behavior, because behavior is what really matters. That's how you actually affect other people around you. But I don't think it necessarily, it's like if you have to own every single bad thing that they do and all the suffering that they cause, or all the suffering that they go through goes back onto you, then you also have to own the good. But at that point, you're dealing with, it's like, at what point does this child not become your responsibility, and their actions become their own eventually? Is a difficult moral question, and I think it's part of the reason why the gospel provides meaning. Just the gospel in a general amorphous sense provides meaning into a world where it's like, well, actually, you don't have to own that. And understanding that you were imperfect and your father before you was imperfect and your children after you are going to be imperfect means that there has to be, in order to not have this sort of sense of like, I don't know what I'm responsible for because I was taught this way. The ideas behind of free will. If free will actually exists, or if it doesn't exist, either way, there has to be some sort of an atonement to be able to make sure that when people do things that are not good, that they don't have to be accountable. Because otherwise, that it would be impossible for you to actually be made pure. But I guess, like, you are held accountable. It's just not in the same sense as many might think, I suppose. I don't know. It's a complicated thing. I don't know. Either way.
Perpetuation of that existence is bad. If a few societies of the ancient past did seriously agree to be anti-natalist, then obviously their existence would be very short, and would likely be lost to the ashes of history. Today, there are a rare few groups that view procreation as a negative, such as the voluntary human extinction movement, where, according to their views, voluntarily not reproducing would...
This is such a bizarre image, because it kind of implies that when humans voluntarily become extinct, like, it's like, would the animals around be happier? Like, I really do think that the same flaws in human imperfection would arise in other species eventually, if what we understand about evolution to be true. Whether or not, if it didn't happen with humans, it would have happened with someone else. Like, in that sense, it's paradoxical to say that, specifically, I don't know. I don't get it. It doesn't compute.
I think there's this video out there where it shows, like, if humans all disappeared, what will happen? And what ends up happening is the world restores itself. Well, Mother Nature restores itself.
Right. Entropy.
But yeah, what happens though is you're gonna have, like you said, the next top of the food chain animal essentially dominate. And I think us as humans, what our benefit is we can actually create a world where it's even across the whole board. Like, no one animal dominates the other. And
nature cannot do that. Like, that can never happen in nature. Mankind dominates itself. Every other species is going to dominate either other members of its own species or members of other species. Like, it's just a fool's errand to try and to remove all inequity and all the inequality from the world, because it's gonna be there no matter how hard you try. It certainly doesn't mean that people should not be held accountable in a temporal sense towards their what they actually did wrong, but it's a strange idea that really just like I don't see how that can actually like work in execution, where it's like, well, yeah, Earth's biosphere will be allowed to return to its former glory, and all remaining creatures will be free to live, die, evolve if they believe in evolution. It's just like, there's so much fallacy in that statement. It's just like all remaining creatures will be free to evolve, and it's just like, yeah, and what if they evolve to the point where they become like us and they think the exact same thing? Like it's like it's a never-ending cycle. Like it's just a fool's errand to say that humanity, any intelligent being anywhere, should just cease to exist because suffering is inevitable.
Let's say they do evolve and they have the ability to make the technology we have. Like, their time will.
You're cutting out.
Ticking.
You're cutting out.
Really?
Yes.
I don't know what's going on.
Do you have your noise suppression off? You gotta flick that. Gotta flick that. Wildlife rapidly going extinct and tens of thousands of children dying each day are not laughing matters.
Hello?
Hello.
Is
Hopefully
there
you're
any?
good. I think
Is
you're
it better?
good. I think you're good.
Oh, nice,
Probably.
nice. Oh, it is. Oh, it was on. I see what it was. Automatically determined. That's what was going on.
Cringe.
So
Yeah.
basically, what I was trying to say is, let's say they do evolve.
Mm-hmm.
They have their time cut short because the sun basically has a timer. That bitch is gonna blow up. But we have the ability now to create technology to, go to a different planet. Well, we don't have it now, but we have the awareness, and we're upgrading technology as time goes on.
Project. That's not how.
Yeah.
That's not how Matthew McConaughey sounds, but
But we have the potential to do that. So I don't know if we cut our humanity. If we stop evolving, if we just eliminated each other immediately, that would just ruin the chances of all the animals doing that. So
like we wouldn't be able to save the animals along with us or any future species of the animals. If we were to just die, we wouldn't be able to actually extend the life of anybody else. Well, but I think the entire idea is that, well, everyone's going to die eventually, and before they die, they're going to suffer. So I don't know why it only extends to humans then, because in that case, why would we not like try to take all the animals with us as well? Because it's like, well, they're going to suffer too. It's like, especially if scientifically you believe that humans are just a advanced form of animal, which I don't really think actually is very disputable. It's like clearly that's the way that it is, but it's like, if you think that it's suffering to exist, then why does that not apply to other animals or plants for that matter? Like, it's like, hasn't it been proven that plants can kind of scream in pain, even though we can't really like perceive that? They can kind of writhe in pain, even though it's over a massive amount of time. It's like,
I mean, I don't think they've seen Animal Planet, because there's areas where we don't even touch, where animals regardless suffer. So, like, oh, there's more hyenas, so there's less fucking hares around, and they're
you're cutting
drive
out
for
again.
themselves.
Something happened.
It's my mic. I think there's
Oh yeah, it happens with the Yeti. Like the connection can be poor, like on the USB. You got to blow it out like a NES cartridge.
Oh, really?
I don't know. I think so. I believe so. I don't know if blowing it out might help. Maybe it would.
Hold on.
You just got to make sure that you're not like shaking or wobbling the cord once it's in. If the red light is flickering, then it's probably not the best connection.
Yeah, no, it's an old wire, so I'm trying not to move. That's why it was happening.
Either way, I think we've basically extended this sort of topic. I think I've kind of got
Prevent
to move on.
environmental degradation. The Shakers, a Christian
Hey,
sect
I literally brought
founded in
these
the
up earlier.
1700s, is entirely celibate. Procreation was forbidden after they joined the society, and members were added through indenture, adoption, or conversion. As you can imagine, their communities eventually declined. As of 2019, there was only one active Shakers community.
Wait, what? I said was. I said was because I didn't think they still existed. Is this like a revival, or is it like... It must be a revival, because everybody who thought that they should have all like voluntarily decided to be celibate and not to like procreate, they'd all be dead. Also, this is a remarkably liminal space, and I love it. I swear I saw like some video that there was like a glitch. Or did you show me this? There's like a Google Maps glitch where there was a specific place on the Earth that looked kind of like this, and it like glitched the heck out. It reminds me of that. I don't know where I'd seen that.
Well, all I remember was like when they zoomed in and they clicked like view perspective or whatever. It was like
No.
It was like some weird robot.
There was something. Yeah. Oh, we know. It was at a Chilling Scares.
Now's the time where you tell me
Oh,
everything's gonna be okay.
stupid! I don't have the
Everything's gonna
dumb
be okay.
ad blocker on this. Cringe.
I ran out of YouTube Red.
I ran. Yeah, it's literally this.
Locations. Oh my god.
Was it actually called New Baltimore?
Something completely different from
Look
the
at
actual
that.
town in real life.
This is
If you
so
zoom out
scary.
far enough, the
Lavender
glitch
Town.
disappears, and the roads, people, and houses start to look normal again. The location had the same appearance on Google Maps for 8 years,
It's just a
until in
massive
2015,
corruption.
Google finally managed to fix the issue by uploading new pictures of New Baltimore to the platform.
This is
To
so
this day,
disturbing.
it's unknown what caused the glitch, and Google never gave an explanation as to why it happened.
It's just corruption. Like that. I mean, like that. Like that's it. It's just your classical like
It's
JPEG.
frightening.
Yeah, it's cool though. Yeah, that's what it reminded me of. Anyway.
community
What is that
on
thing?
Earth.
That black thing. Is that a well?
Oh, this.
Mm-hmm.
It looks kind of like an oil pump. It could be a well. I'm not certain what that is.
Huh.
I'm no expert in shaker technology.
On the other side of the Christian spectrum, you have the Quiverful, a group of conservative Christians who shun the use of contraception
Yeah.
and basically have as many children as possible. Ironically, the
nightmare.
Quiverful movement may have more real-world controversy than the opposite extreme.
I mean, yeah, people who just die don't contribute anything negative or positive to society. Like, it's just like, oh yeah, those people existed. They thought that they shouldn't give birth, and then they died. And that's it. And anybody who agrees with them does the same, where they exist and then they die. And they didn't
about
necessarily
themselves?
force anybody to also die with them, without being able to have children. Whereas, like, clearly having a billion children is going to have a significantly heightened effect.
What about incels?
I mean, that's an entirely different topic. It's like that's a different mess of its own. That's
big do you think their
crazy.
house is?
Well, it's you see this in the East as well, where there's like it's so weird because like you can still see like the genetic similarities, but that it just looks strange.
I don't know if I'd feel comfortable doing this as a father.
It's like the mayor of Whoville. He's gotta keep his kids on this rotation, this nightmare blunt rotation of children, where it's just like, okay, how was your okay, that's your drama for the day, and okay, this is what you're doing with. He's like 292 daughters and one son or whatever.
Who's the girl sitting on that guy's lap? That I know that's not a sister, but
I mean,
on the left.
was this in the South? I'm joking. Probably. I mean, this is probably. It's like you can kind of see when you look at all of the faces where the genetic differences start to show.
Mm-hmm.
They appear to like spray tans, though. There's at least two
Yeah.
spray tans in this image.
No, is that a sister? Or is that a wife? Because I don't think that's.
Well,
a sister.
I think clearly these two are together, and these two are together. I think this is a sister, and this is a sister. Because if you look at the
so
rest of them, the genetic lottery clearly does not favor beards. None
Or
of them
eyebrows.
have facial hair, so this guy has facial hair, so he's got to be different. This guy just has just obvious, blatant physiognomy that is not consistent with the rest of them. Like his nose is, like when you look at the noses of everybody, they look very reminiscent of the parents here. So it can
think
be
out of all
real
of them,
fascinating
that's
just to see, like, this is the logical extent. It's just like how much genetic diversity can there be between two people, like, and you can really still see the resemblance no matter how many times you kind of roll the dice on that. Just fascinating. I don't think contraception is inherently a like sinful, bad, evil thing, though. Like, it's a bit of a interesting idea, especially in reality, in what is the word, whatever the word is.
Contraception, and basically have as many
Practice,
children
in
as
practice.
possible. Ironically, the Quiverful movement may have more real-world controversy than the opposite.
So Quiverful was a movement. Oh, like I have assumed that the Duggars is a specific like family. Like that might be that family. It's the Duggars.
Extreme.
Sounds like a
Professor
slur.
David Benatar is the leading philosopher on
Wells Fargo.
antinatalism. He's a mysterious figure, never showing his face and rarely giving personal details about his life,
blurry
especially
and he's-
whether he has children or not. He wants his arguments to be viewed on their own. His fascinating book
Which I think is certainly fair enough, but if you know, practice what you preach, you know, if you have arguments that are that, and you genuinely believe in those arguments, because anyone can argue for anything and not necessarily believe, but if you genuinely believe in those arguments, then it's an important reflection to your own moral character whether or not you actually practice what you preach. Like that goes for everybody who believes anything. If it's one rule for me and another rule for thee, then that's something different. But I don't know.
Better Never to Have Been gives a comprehensive argument in favor of his version of antinatalism. Now I say version because antinatalism is one simple idea that can have several implications depending on what you
this is
mean
how,
specifically.
this is how
Antinatalism
rational
simply
thought
means
works.
anti-procreation. It could, but does not automatically mean that the legal right to having a child should be taken away, or that people should be forcibly...
That was my concern initially with this, is that, like, what amount of it is actually forcible and what amount of it is just, like, voluntary. Because, you know, in this it says voluntary extinction. It's just like, well, yeah, but, like, you can't get the only way for the human, every single human being to go extinct is if there is an actual effort into forcing people into doing so, that actually involves violence, not as, you know, because he had said that earlier at this point where it's like, well, no, I'm not talking about like nuclear war or whatever, or it's just like, no, like everybody should just agree to die is sort of the idea with it. But it's like, I don't know, I don't know how possible. Well, I do know that it is impossible to say to everybody that they should not have children, because clearly people like this exist. You are never going to convince people who did this that it was wrong to have one child, let alone 30. I wonder what the world record is. Yeah, and it happens in India as well. Sometimes with multiple wives. I remember that it was in like a Ripley's Believe It or Not. There was a man who had 1 billion children. And I don't remember if he had multiple wives as well. Easiest way to have 1 billion children is to have multiple wives. The Mormons.
sterilized. One could have some antinatalist views, but also think abortion, for example, should not always be pursued. There is a big difference between
That's
aborting a
interesting.
fetus and choosing not to even conceive in the first place. There is a big
That's
difference between
certainly
determining whether a life is worth starting or whether a life is worth continuing, if you believe a
Or whether a life is worth ending, of course. That's very relevant to this topic.
fetus is considered a living human being. As you will learn, antinatalism does not automatically mean promortalism. The first argument Benatar puts
What is like pro, like people should die? Is that what that is? The view, it is better for an individual to cease to exist. It does not fail at addressing the problem of suffering. So it's literally is like not that you shouldn't give birth, but you should die. It would be better for you to just stop existing right now, because that's how you prevent suffering to yourself. And if everybody prevented suffering to themselves, then that would be no more suffering. We cured the cancer. The bad news is you're dead.
Right.
Fourth
Well,
is
they-
that coming into
technically you wouldn't have
existence
cured
is
it,
always a
but-
harm. He argues this through something he calls the asymmetry of pleasure and pain. Benatar argues that the presence of pain is bad and the presence of pleasure is good.
Aristotle
I would
agrees.
say basically everyone agrees with that. But he also points out that the absence of pain is good.
Wait, was
Even
that
if-
was that Aristotle that was all pleasure and pain? No, he was in like virtue ethics. I forget what that's called. What either way.
that good is not enjoyed by anyone. Whereas the absence of pleasure is not bad unless there is somebody for whom this absence is a deprivation. It can be easier to think of it like a chart with 4 quadrants. One column where someone does exist, and another where someone doesn't exist. As you can see, scenario B is the only scenario where there is guaranteed no bad. If you could know in advance that the child you brought into existence was going to spend a majority of its life in pain, I think most reasonable people would not bring that child into existence. Benatar agrees that if you could know in advance that the child you bring into existence would live a life completely without suffering, then this asymmetry would not apply.
Well, the issue is that nothing ventured, nothing gained. Like, just because you know it's going to be tough does not mean that you should give up. And especially, I don't think it should mean that you should give up in allowing other people to exist in that way. Like it's like, you know, we're gonna have a lot of absence of pleasure, therefore we should not try. It's like this is inherently nihilistic. It's just miserable. Like I think the only reason that life is worth living is because it's imperfect, because there's struggling in it. Because if it was all easy, and if there was a complete absence of pleasure, then like we would have no frame of reference. There would be no point to any of it. We could never see ourselves being grateful for what we have if we didn't have a lack of good. It's like, well, I'm grateful for this good thing that I've got. Because I used to live in a time that I didn't have that thing. It's really easy to become spoiled in the good things that we have got, because you don't know how it is to not have that.
I think it depends on the situation. Like if the mom's like a druggie and the dad's like a criminal, and the adoption area, let's say it's Detroit, the adoption center, it's not renowned. Do you really think you should allow this kid to prosper in a community where he's not gonna be recognized, and it's hard to really, financially even come up? You know what I mean?
Well, obviously the idea is that that the community in and of itself should be improved. You know, the Earth being a difficult situation in which to involve yourself doesn't mean that we should never strive for anything better. Indeed, it must needs be that we strive for, absence of pain and the we should actually strive for good rather than to give up in the face of bad.
I understand that, but I don't trust, the government to just turn around and be like, all right, let's invest in Detroit's community. Okay,
And that's actually
So to
why Detroit is went in the direction that it did, is because of government intervention.
Yeah. Well, what was I gonna say? Apparently, they're doing better now.
I
Apparently,
would hope so.
but in terms of like, there are communities that are just wrong. I'm not just gonna
Hmm.
specifically go on Detroit. I feel like it's not, again, not just like the government's responsibility, but the people's.
Hmm.
But the people aren't educated and they don't know any better, so it's
But the
kind of just
people,
like
yeah.
a devolving like spiral. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So I do want to believe, and I do want to push for like a community that's like better. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But it's just, if I was in that situation, I would be considering an abortion. You know what I mean?
Well,
Because I don't want
I
a
don't
kid to
think so.
suffer.
I think if you know that the kid is going to not be growing up in an easy area to be, then it doesn't mean that you should kill the kid. It means that you should go and save the kid by taking your kid somewhere else where they're going to actually be in a better situation.
But what if they can't afford it? You know what I mean?
What do you mean can't afford?
They can't afford
Eventually, you have to put
to
the good
move.
of another moral being ahead of the convenience of your situation. Like,
And
just because
there's
you
also
can't necessarily afford to like find a home elsewhere doesn't mean that you can't like literally walk the entire way
let,
if you have to. Like, there are
let's
many good options before you get to that point. But
but let's say like he has a mother that's sick
hmm,
and he's stuck there. You know, because like the benefits that are the healthcare benefits that are helping his mother are there. You know what I
hmm,
mean? Or she just can't leave because she's that sickly. And it's just like,
hmm,
yeah, like at that point, I should have not slept around. But it's like we're in the situation
hmm.
now. Um, what is the best way to go about this?
Yeah,
You know
it's
what
a
I mean?
definitely a difficult moral question, but I still wouldn't ever consider that because there is a complication means that you have to, there's a difference between like like a big aspect of nature is that things strive and fight so hard to live. Human beings, even in infancy, strive and fight so hard to live that, you know, if given its natural, if allowed its natural progress to take place, then you would be eventually it would live or it would die depending on what the circumstances actually allow for. But making an affirmative decision to kill is completely different than making than allowing the natural process to take its place. And sometimes the natural process, depending on what your circumstances may be, that you can actually improve the chances. Life expectancy has gone up drastically as people who have been alive have made medical advances to ensure that we can stop the body from actually we've extended the lifespan long beyond what the body was sort of originally able to do. Like in the opposite sense, child, what's the term? Death rate, not expectancy, morbidity. I don't know, like whatever it is, like the amount of children that are viable, depending on the circumstances and the medical technology that's available and the innovations that have been made, it becomes more and more and more possible for a child that is struggling to be able to live, because we are removing certain natural obstacles that prevent them from being able to live. A man-made obstacle in the in the form of a difficult situation surrounding them, I don't think justifies making an affirmative, in an actual action-based sense. You are making the decision to kill rather than to attempt to fight for the life of something that already will attempt to live.
Don't get me wrong, I would not do this for a multitude of reasons. Let's say the baby mama fucker is like, I don't want to have this child. Like, I'm only gonna take it and try to like work so damn hard to financially support this child. I'm simply saying this because I could see this happening to like somebody out there that's in poverty. I would never do that though. If I had the choice, I would always say no. And I understand it's just like, okay, so why do you support other people doing it? It's just, I don't know. I understand. I don't trust people to really, because I don't trust people. That's honestly it. I think there's people that'll raise a child shit. You know, I think there's people that'll just fuck and then send the child off to fuck off.
And
you know,
this is exactly what I was discussing before I started the video, literally like 2 hours ago. Is Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, believed that people should not actually have the choice, the freedom to be able to have their own bodily autonomy over their ability to procreate. That people misuse those tools, and therefore they shouldn't be allowed to procreate. They shouldn't be actually allowed, and that is actually the entire fundamental basis of Planned Parenthood as an action, as a vehicle for her to remove that ability, or at least encourage it through a sort of a cultural dissemination of her worldview, that it is a good thing to not be giving birth, and indeed to kill what is already living. You know, what I had started out with is that, you know, it was she was a eugenicist, and many of the fundamental ideas that are at the roots of this line of thinking, like, I don't know, just fundamentally the priorities are completely different. But another thing that I'd mentioned is that, you know, what is good is good, and what is evil, no matter who does it. This is part of my sort of reflection on what had happened to Tumad, and sort of what my reaction had been to that just because I felt bad for someone in a certain situation doesn't mean that them putting other people in danger wasn't actually a moral referendum on them still. Like, they are still responsible for the harm that they cause to other people, no matter how bad you feel for them in that situation. That actually is what sort of I think a pretty solid definition of evil is empathy is empathy never makes for good policy, because if you focus so hard on how this person was feeling, you end up justifying the actions that they took, regardless of the effect that they actually had on others, regardless of the rights that were violated, but the rights of others that were violated by those actions that were taken. You know, yeah. I can understand how difficult of a situation that it is, but it cannot ever justify you taking the life of somebody else, especially somebody who has no ability to actually vouch for themselves and say, hey, I actually want to live.
I've actually not discussed this, but kind of brought this up to you with that video of philosophy, Immanuel Kant's moral philosophy, where it's like the mean shouldn't be for the end. Like, I don't want to have sex with a girl just for my pleasure.
Yeah, I didn't get to that one.
Yeah, so the philosophy is it's immoral to do something as such, because as humans we're more valuable than
Right.
just that. That's just a summary. That I think the guy in the video explained
As
it
in
beautifully.
like anti-Machiavellianism, as in like the ends do not justify the means.
Yeah, like the means should the end goal should have more than just, oh, I just wanted to do this just so I could fuck. It should be more like, I wanted to start a relationship with her. But I don't think people that are, maybe some are, but I think majority of people that end up getting abortions do it for pleasure. You know what I mean? In my opinion, it's immoral, and I'm not gonna judge someone for that. It's not my job to condemn, which ties to my religious beliefs. But if I was in a situation where I did that, I would condemn myself because I'm being immoral. I believe if my action is for something, what do you call it? If my actions aren't for a meaningful end, I'm being immoral.
Sure.
It also ties in with laziness. Because I'm distracting myself with TikTok. What is the end goal so I can mentally pleasure myself or whatever? That is immoral because I should be doing something productive
Right.
to better myself.
Well, I want to know more importantly, what constitutes truth? Is truth objective? Is good and evil objective? Is that objectively provable? Because if something is actually immoral, it doesn't matter who's doing it. There should be a clear ability for anybody to actually point to what's going on and say, well, actually, that's immoral. Because if you can't judge on somebody doing something that is one of the most immoral actions that you can ever take, which is permanently ending somebody else's life, taking away their rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness forevermore, against their will, and especially not especially without their consent, then if you can't say that is immoral and that is wrong, then what can you ever possibly judge anybody for?
Are you questioning me of my ability of me not condemning people? Are you questioning
Right.
that?
If you can't condemn somebody of doing one of the most egregious moral sins, then how
unless-
can you ever have any contempt for anybody else, for anything that they do that bothers you in any way?
Unless I'm a judge.
Because I think in the sense that,
It's okay.
because it is a tough question, but I think in
Yeah.
the sense that human beings, or just simply the idea that if morality is subjective, then you can never have any, that it's sort of an anarchistic way of thinking, where it's like, well, there's actually nothing that we can agree on, because anybody can just say that I feel this way, and therefore that justifies everything that I do. I think therefore I am.
This is how I'll explain it. If it's not in God's path or the law's path, I'm not going to agree to it. So, for example, and it's also situational based. If I have control to condemn, my philosophy with Stoicism, which one of the beliefs is justice. I have to have and serve justice. If I'm being faithful to that and God, and I had the ability to condemn somebody for killing, I would.
Well, you do have the ability to condemn someone. All you have to do is say that I condemn that action. That is wrong.
Well, I can.
You don't have the ability
condemn.
necessarily
I think-
to punish them for that. But
There
if you
you
do
go.
believe in justice,
So-
then you believe that there should be a system in place to punish somebody for something that they have done that
What I meant-
has been
what I-
violating of somebody else.
I think I misworded myself. What I meant to use for condemn is judge. I can't judge you.
Like
Criticize.
punish.
No, judge you. Just like criticize. Like, oh, you're a shit person. I don't think it's my job to judge. I think that's God.
I
also
think-
think it's God's job to condemn. I mean, I could, if a serial killer was right in my face and killed somebody, I could say like, hey, I don't agree with what you did. You know what I mean? But I also don't know their background. I don't know why they did it. If I did even know, let's say it was to defend himself.
Well,
That's one
even if you
thing. Let's
knew,
say
even if
he
you
was
could put yourself in their shoes for every single moment of their life, does that ever justify violating somebody else's rights in that way? Because I think that that's evil.
let's say-
I think it's evil to suggest it, and that's actually what a lot of Christians and Jews alike will interpret. Which commandment is it? The one. Oh, my brain was braining. That thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. That many people would interpret that to mean that you know, just because God has a standard doesn't mean that I have to say that other people should also follow that standard, and that I shouldn't advocate for that standard, and shouldn't actually say that when other people do something that isn't in line with that standard, that I can't actually tell them that that's not in line with the standard that is set for us to live as human beings. I think that is actually sort of taking the idea that like that is what that interpretation of that would mean. Where it's like, well, you're using God's words to try and justify the evils of man.
Do you think I'm doing it?
Well, I think if that's what I think that's the logical extent of that, is to say, well, I can't truly know. I think it's in the sense of final judgment. We're not called to judge in the sense that like we are going to say you are going to hell or you are going to heaven. I think that is completely different from saying, hey, what you have done has caused what you have done has been a morally repugnant and should not be accepted, and you are clearly behaving in a way that is not conducive towards your happiness or anybody else's happiness, and therefore you should uphold higher standards. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that to somebody. If you know better than somebody else, and if you believe what you believe, then you should there should be some sort of a moral obligation for you to actually spread the ideology that you have. If you truly believe that it is true, then if you see somebody who doesn't agree with that ideology, you have an obligation. Perhaps you can understand them, but also
I can
understand the limits of that.
There lies what I was going to say, the limits of it. So there's context. So if I have control of a situation, yeah, I will condemn. Most of the time, I don't. If somebody's being immoral or rude, I'm not too confrontational unless it's somebody that I'm close with. In general, I'm just not confrontational. But I tend to say I don't risk them bad. Because I think I pray that they get what they deserve, whether it's good or bad. Because I don't know what's going on in their
forgive them
situation.
for they know not what they do.
Yeah, because I don't. Let's say I had the power to condemn whoever I wanted. And
Do you mean condemn or do you mean punish?
both? Both. It's gonna get to a point where it's just like, well, I'm gonna arrest somebody that really needed help. So I didn't send them help. So that's why I'm not saying I'm taking a passive approach. But the majority of the time, I don't have control of what people do, and I can't condemn them because I'm not in a position to do so. But don't get me wrong.
In many a situation, I do think that it is actually wrong, indeed, to condemn somebody. Sometimes, there is a certain point where actually overstepping your boundaries. But I do believe that if you. I think just because you are fighting for justice doesn't necessarily mean that justice is not exactly what somebody needs in that situation, that actually it would help them, and that help is all around them if they would just accept it. Because in a lot of cases, if you dial it back from like sort of the situation of someone actually making an affirmative, like a murder, if you dial it back to like you're a father and your son makes one of your other kids cry by hitting them in the face. Classic little childlike moral dilemma. It's within your responsibilities, I would say, because you know better and the child does not know better. It's within your moral purview. It is sort of an obligation of yours, especially given that that you brought the child into the world. You have responsibility over this child, that you actually teach the child that what they did was wrong, and also ensure that teaching sets into them. Sometimes there are some situations where the punishment can incentivize worse behavior, and there's sometimes where the punishment is exactly what they need in order to stop that behavior because they learned a lesson from it. I can think of situations where, with authority in my life, that has been the case for me, where I wasn't learning a lesson, and then it took me messing up enough to have a lesson taught to me for me to finally understand. Okay, I was out of line when doing that. I got to make sure not to behave that way anymore.
Yeah, I hope you understand my approach though. I don't want you to think that I'm passive all the time. I'm not. If I can, I will. If God gives me the strength or the ability to, I will. I will if I have to, because
Right.
God has a funny way of communicating to you and putting you in certain situations. But in terms of the majority of my current situations, let's say someone's just being an ass at work, I don't have the ability to condemn them. I
Right.
could report them to HR. I could talk to my
It's
supervisor about
whatever,
them, but that's the
man.
extent
If
of I
you're
can
gonna
do.
behave that way, then that's up to you. Yeah, that definitely stands to reason. It's just because other people are imperfect around me doesn't mean that I have the moral obligation to ensure that all of them are saved. I think it's it's an obligation to be honest about what you believe in many senses, so that you can be an example to people who may not have actually thought that way. And if people are interested, I do believe it is an obligation for you to actually spread. It's well, I believe this, and this is what I see the truth to be, and therefore that's Logic Trail should be able to be enticing enough to other people, if it is the truth, that they should be able to follow it as well, and to partake in the good that I have been given but through that process. But I don't think that's the same thing as saying every single time anybody does anything wrong around me, I have to slap them figuratively or literally in order to ensure that they stop that behavior. I think it is a good thing to try and teach people lessons. It is a good thing to say, hey, I don't know if you're not aware of this, but that behavior is not going to make you happy. In fact, that behavior is going to make you miserable, and it's only going to get worse if you continue behaving that way. Extending an olive branch to people is a good thing. I don't think necessarily that it's a praiseworthy thing because it's a difficult thing to do, and because it's not always it's almost never easy to challenge somebody in the way that they behave, in the way that they think, so that they
Right.
can change.
There's been situations though, where I recognize somebody's getting upset over somebody else's actions, and I'll bring up my stoic philosophy on that to them. Some listen, some don't. Um, it's
Yeah, take it or leave
it's
it.
yeah. So that's what it is. I hope you understand
Yeah.
how my morals are and my
No,
philosophies
it
are.
makes sense. It does say in the Bible, you shouldn't cast your pearls before swine, right?
Yeah, and that's my main fear is because I used to do that a lot. I used to jump on someone's back for some bullshit, and it turns out
Like
that's not
people
where they
on
needed
Discord,
help.
where it's hey, your behavior is contributing to your misery, and
Yeah,
I, out of my own concern for you, I want you to actually understand how to behave better in order to help you out. And advice is free, but it's only worth as much as people get out of it, and a lot of the time you can only get out what you put in. So,
Right.
you can't. You can bring a horse to the water, but you can't make him drink. That type of an idea. Like, it's. I think it's in a sense an obligation to. If you believe what you believe, then you should be able to rationalize your position on it. Where it's like, well, yeah, this is why I believe it. I don't just believe it because there's a sort of a bias in my head that led me down this path. It's actually that I have been convinced of the truth of it, and I don't really see any other way being the way that could possibly be.
Yeah,
That is an intellectually solid thing. Like, you should be able to make the case, at least to yourselves, if not to other people, that you are confident in your beliefs and you do believe that what you know to be true is indeed true.
Yeah, I also believe that God has given me certain abilities to help others, and I should, with great power comes great responsibility.
Indeed.
Um, as
Indeed.
of recently though, like I've been kind of like stopping with helping people because of I think a situation I already vented to you about where I felt like it backfired. I think some of my actions were wrong too, but I'm taking a break from helping people because of that.
Well, and a lot of the time, I mean, I was thinking about it recently. If you're surrounded by takers, and all you do is give, and it's just kind of casting the pearls before swine, it's like eventually it becomes real easy to kind of give up hope for everybody else, where it's like they're taking advantage of it. But it in many ways it's like just because you can't see the effect doesn't mean that it takes away from the fact that you've done something charitable. The only thing that takes away from a charitable act is when it literally, by definition, becomes uncharitable, in the sense that it's no longer, it's mandatory charity. Mandatory charity is just taxation, which is theft.
Yeah,
Which I kind of opened the
and
stream with.
I'm just trying to I'm trying to recharge my batteries basically.
Yeah, focus on me for a little while. Sometimes that's a really important thing to do. I do think.
Yeah.
But I think in a lot of ways it's better to have a goal. Living for yourself is not really a recipe for joy. Living for others, for a higher purpose, is truly where more joy comes that would never be there if you were just trying to live for yourself. I don't think only living for yourself can actually bring joy.
Right.
But big old complicated moral discussion. I don't know if because I'm like utterly tired, and I mean technically my bedtime is on like 30 minutes, so I might finish up here. Have to leave it off for another time. Perhaps if I had actually started the video in a better time, then I would have been able to sort of get through. But I do think again I just ramble too much, and then the two of us sort of get sidetracked with different completely different debates. Like, this is entirely separate now at this point from the actual topic at hand. So it is kind of funny. But
Yeah. I should have texted you earlier. I have Discord notifications off. Had you texted me earlier, I would have called. I was stuck watching the show.
No,
Yeah.
I get you. I mean, when I was streaming, I've got the Discord the streamer mode on, so it gets a little bit tough to get all of the notifications through and whatnot. But yeah, it's all good. I don't know if you're welcome to, if I'm gonna be looking into things, looking into finishing this one like tomorrow or something, then you are welcome to hop on with that. I don't know if you're gonna be busy, but
If it's in the morning, yeah, but I'm working tomorrow starting 3 my time.
shoot, I work at 5 a.m. so nope,
Damn.
not really gonna be working.
No, it's fine. You can do this on your own, though.
Yeah, no, for sure.
jump
Might go
on
by a
for
bit
listen.
quicker, but then again, you don't really get the benefit of the bouncing things off and having a discourse, and that's the point of it, isn't it? Actually,
Yeah,
seeking higher
Draconian
truth.
Discord.
Yeah, Discord. Deenie, deenie. Yeah.
Anyway, are you gonna wrap it up here then?
I do believe so. I think it is bedtime for me.
Alrighty,
Bedtime
guys.
indeed.
Outro music.
Wap, 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 wap. Wap, 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 wap.
Peace. Have a good night.
Bruh. Oh, I totally forgot that I didn't even read that chat message. Hello, Brahim. That's almost certainly not how that's pronounced. Brahim. This is the first Trovo chat I've gotten in like ages, and it just so happens I like wasn't even like streaming a game. Strange. Maybe one day in future I will be game streaming, and I mean it'll be fun. Yeah, a lot of the times like just having the Draconian discourse, just because of how like how wired I get is just like it's a little bit difficult to just keep on going with that sort of mental stamina. But I mean, it is a good thing to have the discussions. I feel better for it than if I hadn't. I think I've relaxed my mood in many ways, so it's nice. But anyhow, yep, it's Jova. It's Jova.